Hi,
My name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Okay, my friends, once again, it's time for Morning Talk. I'm your host, J.C. McCauley, of course, along with me. We have Vicky Fennell. Hey, good morning, Vicky. How you doing?
Good morning, Stan. Good morning, Hartford.
You know, how was your weekend? Did you have a good weekend?
My weekend was great. It was uneventful, quiet. It was a different Memorial Day.
Uneventful, quiet. It was a different Memorial Day. It was a very interesting Memorial Day.
Very interesting. Very few cookouts.
Quiet and then yet active, if you will. Mm-hmm. Jonathan, what did you do?
I just took a drive around, took a walk. I didn't really do too much. I didn't really have anything really planned for my Memorial Day. Independence is the type of holiday that I kind of get geared up towards, but if something came along, you know, it really, like you say, wasn't much cookouts. I didn't want to really push myself to go to a state park or a beach because I just didn't really have anything planned. So it was okay. I mean, the weather was real nice. I had really enjoyed the weather. It was really comfortable after a while. So it was just a normal day in a sense. You know, to be honest.
Just a normal day in a sense. So you didn't do anything. You didn't do anything exciting or overly special.
No, like I say, Independence Day is the day I kind of plan everything for. Every now and then, if somebody is getting together for a cookout or something, I would go for a Memorial Day. But I just couldn't get into it. You know, it was just another day. To be honest, it was just.
I did a lot of sleeping. I mean, I don't know. It started Thursday, and then it was just like full blown, just sleeping. Right. I think my body was just tired, you know.
Mm-hmm. Your mind, you know.
Yeah.
You do a lot. You did a lot of thinking last week. I guess.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, you know, your mind gets tired.
Very much so.
There's nothing like your mind.
But it was a good tiredness, though.
Right.
It's a good tiredness, but a lot of sleeping and a lot of eating. I think what I did is like an indoor cookout. There's such a thing, but a lot of eating. So I'm on a liquid fast now. So
liquid fast.
Yeah, I got my lemongrass tea going on here. So.
All right. Well, we start our day off. We should do a pretty interesting program today. We got a lot of interesting guests today, and our first guest is going to join us via Zoom. And we'll see if we can't navigate our Zoom guest and get them in here. And I want to welcome him to the program. He is a man who knows a little bit about finance, former Comptroller General of the United States of America. And you had him on your program once before, right, Jonathan?
Actually, I had him on twice.
He
was running for lieutenant governor in 2014. If you could actually run for lieutenant governor in Connecticut. And then he was on, I can't remember the exact year. It could have been 2016, I believe, maybe 2017. We was talking about, no, actually, this was 2016 because we was talking about the U.S. presidential election.
Okay.
And I remember him saying that he had already cast his vote. So I had him on two different times. And he's very well knowledgeable on fiscal responsibilities, government issues, tremendous background, David Walker. He's been on 60 Minutes, Fox, television network, many different media formats throughout the country.
All right, well, let's welcome him on board. Thanks for joining us, sir. How are you doing this morning?
Well, Stan, I hope you and Jonathan and everybody are doing well.
We're doing well. How was your Memorial Day weekend?
Well, I'm a member of the Sons of the American Revolution, and so Memorial Day is very meaningful to me because it's those who end up giving the ultimate sacrifice for our freedoms. And normally what I would be doing on that day is I would be going as a member of the Sons of the American Revolution to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Arlington and laying a wreath. But this year, obviously, that was not possible because of the restrictions associated with coronavirus. But my wife and I did something that was still special, but very different, and that is that we got together with our oldest granddaughter and really caught up with her, which was a good thing.
All right. Well, we thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and joining us here on Morning Talk. One of the things I had in terms of questions was how we locally for like I won't say common people, but just the average Joe, us people who are affected by all the stuff that's going on, and that hear about the need for more money is being spent, and I think that a lot of people don't realize the impact that large expenditures of money by the federal and state government have on them, because I guess they're kind of living from day to day. But the living from day to day, or what a lot of people might refer to as a survival mode, doesn't lessen the impact of national debt and things along that line. As I was hoping you could kind of like walk people through why it is so important that the nation's economy be
yeah.
good.
Well, Stan, let's provide a baseline first.
Okay.
My personal view is the COVID-19, or also known as the coronavirus, is a very serious public health issue that we need to take seriously. However, I also believe that our government leaders, for the most part, have failed to achieve a reasonable balance between economic considerations, public health considerations, personal health considerations, and individual liberty considerations. And let's talk about some of the data. 50% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. They do not have any significant savings, but in some cases they have significant debt. 50% of all jobs in the United States are in the small business sector. Now, the SBA, the Small Business Administration, defines that as companies that have less than 500 employees, okay? So you have a situation where, the government has basically shut down the economy, other than for things that it deems to be essential, and we can have a separate discussion about what's essential and what's non-essential, all right? So you have all those people that are working paycheck to paycheck. You have all those entrepreneurs that have these small businesses that are seriously, and in some cases, irreparably harmed. Now let's take the data with regard to public health. The last time that we had a major coronavirus pandemic was 1918, and it was called the Spanish flu. Now, if you look at the data from 1918, you'll find out that the modern day equivalent of fatalities in 2020 from this COVID-19, if we had the same death rate in 2020 that we had for the Spanish flu in 1918, we would lose 2 million Americans. And in 1918, the world lost 50 million people from the Spanish flu, and the United States lost 600,000. So the modern day equivalent of that for the United States is 2 million people. Well, we're about 100,000. Nobody is talking about anything near that. The other thing that people don't talk about is that a significant majority, it varies by state, but it's 50% to 80%, of all the deaths are in nursing homes, assisting living facilities, and prisons. And why might that be? Well, for one, you have people living very, very closely together, in many cases having public meals together, and a number of those people end up having underlying chronic health conditions, all right? And yet, rather than focusing, where the problem is overwhelmingly, we ultimately have shut down large parts of the economy. Now, because of that, the Congress has enacted several pieces of legislation trying to help people and trying to be able to help the economy. And it has passed legislation so far totaling almost $3 trillion, if you will, designed to help small business, designed to help individuals, and others. And it's not just through the Treasury Department, it's also the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is doing unprecedented things. The result of that is that the nation's debt as a percentage of the economy, and that's what really matters, okay, will go from about 80% to about 110% in a little over a year, in 1 year. That is higher than has ever been the case in the history of the United States. That is higher than at the end of World War II when we had public debt as a percentage of the economy of 106%. Now, we got something for World War II. We defeated the Axis powers. We saved the free world. We avoided attack on our homeland. And after World War II, we were 50% of the global economy, and we did the things that we had to do to grow the economy and provide more opportunity. And we went from 106% of GDP down to 35 in 1980. Now we'll be up to 110 within a year. And what do we get for that?
Nothing.
Right. And what's the fastest growing expense in the federal government? Interest. And what do you get for interest?
More debt.
Nothing. Okay. So the bottom line is, look, this was a serious situation that needed to be taken seriously, but we did not employ a risk-based approach, which would consider really two primary factors. Geographics, because it's not affected every place the same. Take Connecticut. I used to live in Connecticut. I now live in Virginia. Connecticut is very different. East of the river is very different than Fairfield County. Okay, urban Hartford is very different than Litchfield County. Okay, yes. One size fits all approaches don't make a whole lot of sense. Okay, do you want a social distance? Absolutely. Do you want to wear a mask? Absolutely. Do you want to wash your hands? Absolutely. Do you want to stay indoors if you have any symptoms of any kind of illness whatsoever? Absolutely. Do you want to maximize telecommuting? Absolutely. Okay. And the second issue you have to consider about is demographics. All right. What are the populations that are most at risk? All right. And they tend to be people that have underlying health conditions, and that varies by age. But obviously, people who are seniors tend to have more chronic health conditions. But not all seniors do. Frankly, my wife and I are fortunate. We're in very good health. Okay. But not everybody's in the situation. Some people a lot younger than us have underlying health conditions. And unfortunately, a higher percentage of the minority population have underlying health conditions. And part of that is because of hypertension. Part of that is because of diet. Part of that is because of a variety of different things. But it's a reality. It's a reality we need to take seriously. So the bottom line is look, there's no free lunch, Stan. And any politician who tells you there's a free lunch doesn't know what they're doing. Right. And let's bring it to Connecticut. Connecticut is in terrible financial condition. It's one of the bottom 3 states in the union with regard to finances. Hartford's got serious problems too, although not as serious as they were 2 years ago because the state basically bailed them out. And you got to say, okay, well, where'd that money come from?
Right,
okay?
right.
Because the state's in terrible shape, right? And I used to be on the municipal, finance accountability board in Connecticut, so I know that very well. But so the bottom line is that we need to have compassion. We need to have compassion and be able to try to do everything we can not to infect others. We need to be more concerned about that than ourselves, not to infect others. On the other hand, we need to have compassion for the tens of millions of people that are out of work, for the millions of entrepreneurs who can't operate their business. Compassion has to be thought of in a much broader term, and we must be able to achieve a much better balance between economic, personal health, public health, and our overall economy. And look at last thing I'll say here, Stan. I apologize for saying so much up front.
Keep going.
Is think about people who are not able to get cancer screenings, heart screenings, or treatments. Think about the fact that liquor sales are up 70% plus. Think about what's happening with regard to stress in the family, with all the kids are at home rather than at school, okay? And you're out of work. so we're going to see, unfortunately, some adverse, health statistics, as a result of what we've done. Good news is we're now starting to open back up in phases. That's important. Mm-hmm. But when we're looking forward, hopefully we'll learn the lesson that we need to take a more risk-based approach based on demographics and geographics. We should not take a one-size-fits-all approach. And unlike in 1918, where we lost way more people, and obviously losing anybody is a matter of concern, okay? But when we lost way more people, we didn't take an economic hit, anything like this. We have shot ourselves, and now we have to be able to do what we can to recover as quickly as we can, but it's going to take quite a while for us to get back to where we were, and some things are going to change forever.
Yes.
Some things, I'm a professor at the U.S. Naval Academy. I teach the economics of national security. For the first time in our history, we went to distance learning, all right? And I did that from my home, and it went fine, but it's not the same. So we're going to have a lot more, Zoom meetings like this, for business, for education, for other things. We're going to have less travel. We're going to have smaller office spaces, okay? We're going to have more telecommuting. That's going to change forever, and we'll just have to get a sense as to how much and how quickly. Sorry for the very long.
That was good.
That's no problem at all.
Yeah.
No, that was great. I have a question for you, David.
Sure.
I understand that you, a lot of people say, you hear the term comptroller, and what does that mean? And then also, I know that it has something to do with the Government Accountability Office, GAO, right. And unfortunately, most people only hear about the GAO when the president starts to submit the budget, and then he's getting ready to make the State of the Union, and then we see this very large publication, that outlines the budget. Tell us just a little bit about the Government Accountability Office and the role of the controller.
Sure. The Comptroller General of the United States is basically the top auditor and the Chief Performance and Accountability Officer for the United States government. That person also happens to be the Chief Executive Officer of the U.S. Government Accountability Office, the GAO. The GAO is in the legislative branch. It works for the Congress and the American people. It doesn't work for the president. It does a range of audit, investigative, policy analysis, program evaluation work, spanning virtually everything the federal government does anywhere in the world. And it does its work in a professional, objective, fact-based, nonpartisan, non-ideological, non-personal manner, and hopefully in a way that provides some degree of contextual sophistication, all right? Don't just talk about the positives or the negatives, talk about both, all right? Recognize when progress is being made, acknowledge that, but also point out where things aren't where they need to be and what needs to be done to make them better. So that's what the GAO is all about. It is not well known outside of Washington, D.C. It is extremely well known within Washington, D.C. And I had the honor and privilege to be able to serve in that capacity for about 10 years, from 1998 to 2008.
Great. And also, I understand that you were the founder and CEO of the Comeback America Initiative. Tell us a little bit about what the Comeback America Initiative is all about.
Sure. It no longer exists, and I'll tell you why, okay? I published 3 books so far, and I'm sitting here at my computer working on a 4th one right now. And the last book that I published was in 2010 by Random House, and it was called Comeback America, Restoring Fiscal Responsibility, basically is what it was about, okay? And that book, fortunately, made bestseller status. And basically what it did is it talked about how we had lost control of our nation's finances, how we were mortgaging the future of our country, our kids, our grandkids, and future generations, and what the adverse consequences would be if we don't end up doing something. But then it also laid out a number of sensible solutions of things that we can and should do in order to be able to update that. The Comeback America initiative was based in Bridgeport, Connecticut, which is where I lived. I lived in the Black Rock section of Bridgeport, Connecticut for almost 10 years. And I viewed it as being ground zero of fiscal irresponsibility. Bridgeport's in terrible shape, worse than Hartford.
My God.
Connecticut's in terrible shape, and the U.S. has got serious problems. So it was ground zero of fiscal irresponsibility. And what it was intended to do was to help increase public awareness as to those challenges and to engage with the American people all over the United States on sensible solutions to diffuse our ticking debt bomb. And one of the things that we did before we closed, and the reason I call it an initiative, because I was only going to do it for 3 years. That's why it was called an initiative. And in 2012, we undertook a nationwide 10,000-mile, 27-state plus DC National Fiscal Responsibility Bus Tour, which, among other things, proved that a representative group of voters in swing states, both in the North and the South, would agree to accept tough choices, both on the tax side and the spending side, if they were designed to achieve a specific goal, consistent with a range of principles, with a set of principles and values that brought people together rather than divide them apart, and that would diffuse our ticking debt bomb and create a better future for our country, our children, grandchildren, future generations. That's what it was all about. It proved that the people were way ahead of the politicians. Now, frankly, at that time, there was about the highest degree of concern. In 2010 to 12 timeframe was where there was the highest degree of concern for how we've lost control of our finances. And unfortunately, today, we're actually much worse off, especially after the coronavirus, than we were then. But there's much less concern because the politicians won't want to talk about it. They just don't want to talk about it because they don't want to make tough choices. And by the way, that's also at the state and local level too.
Yes.
I have a question. Dave Walker, you mentioned earlier that you felt the federal government has really failed in this coronavirus issue, and you clearly kind of outlined the public policy failures. But the economic failures, let's say with the proposal of a second federal stimulus package plan, do you view that as like a short-term, somewhat of a short-term solution just to keep people's head above water? And what do you think we should be able to do just in case we have another second wave and with the unfortunate circumstances that the government has to shut down the economy again? Are we going to be in a better position to move forward if we have a second wave? I know I kind of put two questions together.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Well, let me start with the second one. Hopefully, if we have a second, we will learn from the first, and that we will not take the one-size-fits-all approach that we took in the first. We'll take a more risk-based approach based on demographics and geographics and not shut down the economy. And hopefully, if we have a second wave, we'll either have or be close to having a vaccine. And we'll know more about treatment, if you will. So that's the issue on that, okay? First, with regard to government failures were at all levels, but they were very different. One of the things that we have to understand is that we have a republic, which is a representative group of government, okay? We don't vote directly. We vote for representatives who vote supposedly in our interest, but many times don't, okay? And we have a situation where we have a division of responsibility, not just between the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. We have a division of responsibilities between the federal government, the state government, and the local governments. Now, believe it or not, in 2019, before COVID-19 hit, the United States was rated number one in the world for being prepared to deal with a pandemic. Number one in the world. Well, we may have been number one, but we clearly were not adequately prepared. We did not have adequate national stockpiles of PPE. We didn't have that's personal protection equipment. We didn't have national stockpiles of ventilators. Okay. The other thing you have to keep in mind is that The president can't, under the Constitution, the president can't tell governors what to do within their own states. The president has authority over international matters, okay? And the president has authority over interstate matters. But within a state, the governors are in charge. And so, while the president ended up, providing guidelines, for what to do with regard to this matter, ultimately the governors were the ones that made the decision about whether or not to shut down the economy and on what basis to start opening it back up. So those kinds of decisions were not presidential decisions. Those kinds of decisions were decisions by governors and in some cases mayors. Now, to give an example of what the president does have authority to do is, the president shut down travel from China. The president shut down air travel from Europe or most of Europe, okay? And the president announced, I guess, a couple of days ago that as of this Friday, we will not be having air travel from Brazil. And he did that because of, to try to be able to contain the further spread of the infection. So there were failures at all levels of government, but the failures were different. And, in some cases we didn't have adequate stuff. We obviously are taking steps to make sure that we do now. In some cases, there were consolidations of hospitals, and maybe too much and maybe not enough hospitals in rural areas, which is not as big an issue for Connecticut given the size of that state, but it is a big issue in other areas. So, yes, there were failures, but the failures were different at different levels of government.
Well, Dave Walker, you mentioned that the president, Donald Trump, was not the one that shut down the economy on the state level, but the President Donald Trump didn't really take the authorization, which he had a power to do, to basically authorize the whole country to be shut down. He kind of turned the power over to the states to make their own personal decision. Was that really a good move in your opinion?
Yeah. He had to do that because he didn't have the constitutional authority to do anything else. If you recall, early on, the president said that he was in charge and he would decide what to do. All right. And, whether you like him or not, he is the president. Okay. And the fact is that he was then advised that he didn't have that authority. He had the authority to do the things that he did with regard to international travel. He has the authority to do things when it deals with interstate. But when you're talking about intrastate, that's the governors. All right. And so what ended up happening was they ended up coming up with these guidelines. And so basically what the federal government can do when it deals with the states and localities, it can have recommendations. And that's what they did. They have recommendations on guidelines. But ultimately it's up to the governors. And in some cases, the governors will delegate some responsibility to local governments, whether that be municipalities or counties. And of course, in Connecticut's one of only 2 states in the union that doesn't have county government. The only other one is Rhode Island, which basically is a county when you get right down to it. But so that's the difference. Okay, the president wanted to do what you're, I think, implying, okay, is, let the government take charge. We'll decide what's going to be done. But he doesn't have the constitutional authority to do that. And that's one of the problems. We're not like China, thank God. China has provinces, which we would equate to states, okay, although not nearly as many we do. China has, the equivalent of governors over those provinces, okay? But China has a very strong central government. And the central government decides what's going to get done, and the central government dictates what's going to get done. So therefore, they had the ability to say, we're shutting down Wuhan. There's no travel domestically out of Wuhan into other parts of China. But what they didn't do is they didn't shut down international travel. And what people don't understand is Wuhan had direct flights to the United States, to Europe, to much of Asia. And so while China did what they needed to do to try to help contain the virus within China, they didn't do what needed to be done to try to help contain the virus around the world. And which is one of the reasons that we are where we are. And that's because of the differences in our government. You know, we have something called a Bill of Rights. You know,
Right.
they don't have that in China. They don't have that in Russia. Okay. But in some cases, what that does is that while it gives us additional personal freedoms and rights, it presents complications, you know, when you're trying to deal with something on a national basis with the division of responsibility and authority between federal, state, and local government.
I have another question. I've read that, you know, as part of your, you mentioned something about unfunded obligations. And, you know, I think with when you hear what's happening with the pandemic, you hear about the expenses that are possibly going to be coming later on. How do you think the governors are going to handle those unfunded, you know, obligations? It probably means they probably don't want to deal with it, number one. And number two, you know, unions. And, you know, as you know, you lived in Connecticut. The Democratic Party is quite reliant on unions. There's an interesting relationship between the two. Wonder if you could speak a little bit about
Sure.
that.
The biggest challenge at the federal, state, and local government level financially is unfunded obligations. Unfunded pension and retiree health care benefits. You know, they far exceed public debt and traditional liabilities. And it varies. You know, at the federal level, we have significant unfunded obligations for civilian and military pensions and retiree health care. But we also have something that the states don't have. We have Social Security and Medicare. And there's tens of trillions of dollars in unfunded obligations associated with them. All right? And unfortunately, at the federal level, the U.S. does not do a very good job of planning, and it tends to employ a crisis management approach. And COVID-19 is a perfect example. We were on an imprudent and unsustainable fiscal path, meaning taxes and spending, before COVID-19, and now we're in a much worse shape, which hopefully will end up increasing the sense of urgency to be able to do something when we get past this crisis. But there's no guarantee, because historically what happens is politicians don't make tough choices until they have to. An example of that is the last time we made reforms, major reforms to Social Security, was 1984. Reagan, Tip O'Neill worked together to get that done. Now, why did they do that? Because within a matter of weeks, the so-called trust fund for Social Security was going to go to zero. And if the trust fund went to zero, the way the law works, tens of millions of Americans would not get paid on time. And I can assure you that that is politically unacceptable, and that was the action forcing event. And by the way, that is going to come up again no later than 2035 for Social Security, and as soon as no later than 2026 for Medicare hospital, they're going to go to zero. And so I guarantee you something will be done when we get close to those dates, but obviously it'd be prudent to do it sooner rather than later. Now, at the state level, there are several states that I refer to as basket cases financially. Illinois is the worst. New Jersey is next. Connecticut is next. And believe it or not, Kentucky's got serious problems too. Now, why? Well, I mean, what are some of the common denominators? Well, one of the common denominators, they're very high tax states, and they have huge unfunded pension and retiree health care obligations. And by the way that, you know, the state governments say they have to balance their books, it's a bad joke. All they have to do is balance cash flow. In other words, all they have to do is balance cash in and cash out. So what do they do in order to quote unquote balance the budget? They don't make pension contributions. They defer making payments for things that they know they owe, but you know they can't pay them this year because they don't have enough money, or they end up going and funding what's called revenue bonds to be able to accelerate getting revenues. Okay, so they play games. It's all a shell game. All right. The single biggest problem in Connecticut, in Bridgeport, and several other cities in that state, Waterbury, Hartford too, but not as bad as Bridgeport and Waterbury, are huge unfunded pension and retiree health care obligations. I'm all for, the right for people to organize. My grandfathers were both in unions, and my dad's father was the head of the United Mine Workers in Birmingham, Alabama. Okay, and so I'm all for that. I have no problem with that. What I have a problem with is when you're dealing with pensions and retiree health care, nobody is bargaining for the taxpayers. The politicians are giving the unions what they want. At the same point in time, they're not funding those obligations, which is creating a ticking time bomb. Connecticut already has high taxes. But if you look at the financial statements, unless they do something to restructure the pension and retiree health care obligations, they're going to go a lot higher in the future. At the same point in time, Connecticut is one of the only few states in the union that actually has a declining population.
Right.
Now, a little bit of that's going to change. We're seeing that in part because of COVID-19, because you have a lot of people in New York that are now going to move to Greenwich, and Litchfield County areas, because they want more space. They don't want to be congested. I mean, or when they start having kids, they'd rather go to, different schools than being in the New York City schools, if you will. So a little bit that's going to change. But let me tell you, and the other thing is, what's a common denominator between New Jersey, Illinois, and Connecticut? Who runs the state government in New Jersey, Illinois, and Connecticut? You want to take a guess?
Democrats?
We all know.
The Democratic
The
Democratic
public sector
Party.
unions.
Oh,
The
unions.
The
unions.
public
I knew you were gonna
sector
say that.
unions run the state.
Yeah.
When the Speaker of the House, who is a public sector union leader, that is a fundamental conflict of interest.
Huge.
Yes, indeed.
One particular party, and I'm not going to mention because I'm a political independent. I got problems with both parties. I got to tell you, okay, one political party is reliant upon public sector unions to win.
Right.
Okay. And as a result, they have not done what needs to be done. That has got to be done, but it's got to be done in a fair and equitable fashion. Just as we're going to have to reform Social Security and Medicare, and just as after we're going to have to reform military compensation and benefits. I'm a member of the Defense Business Board. If you knew how much money an active duty military cost us each year, when you fully load the cost, current cash, current benefits, deferred benefits, it's hundreds of thousands a year per person.
Wow. So
And we're go ahead.
No,
Go ahead, Steve.
well, at some point, there's just not going to be any money. It would seem. Is that fair,
Stan,
or would they just
we
create
have
the money
some. Stan, I lost you.
out of thin air, just print it?
I think I know what you were going to ask. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Well, here's the problem. There are a lot of free lunch people in the world. They think there's a free lunch. History shows that there's not. The latest free lunch theory are from some liberal or progressive, or call them whatever you want, okay, economists, one of which is a former Nobel Prize winner, but I can assure you he didn't win a Nobel Prize for this, and he won't. His theory is that if you have a reserve currency, which the dollar is, and you can borrow in your own currency, then deficits and debt does not matter unless and until you end up having a big inflation problem. Well, here's the problem with that. Number one, we don't own our own debt. Other countries end up buying our debt, including China, Japan, oil exporting nations, et cetera. So we don't control our own destiny there. Secondly, if you want to wait until you have a serious inflation problem, which, by the way, means that interest rates go up dramatically, and interest is already the fastest growing expense, that would just make it worse, all right? If you want to wait till you have a loss of confidence in the United States being able to put its finances together, and a further decline in the dollar, which is going to happen, it's a matter of how quickly and how much, then you're going to have a global depression. And that is not something that we should ever wish for. No, and one of the things I'm working on now is working on a new book, that part of the new book learns lessons from the past. There were many so-called superpowers in the past. They're all gone.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. They're all gone. All of them are gone. So, what happens? I don't want to get all conspiratorial or anything, but you talked about a global depression. What does that look like? Because I don't think people have any concept or idea of just how bad things can get.
Well, unfortunately, we've lost many of our family members who lived through that. And, their values were very different. Okay. I mean, my grandparents lived through that. My father, who died this past November, was a child, and my mother, but they lived through that. And their views were a lot different. I mean, their views were it's important to work. It's important to try to be able to be self-sustaining. It's important to save. It's important to preserve savings. It's important to minimize debt. It's important to be out of debt by the time you want to retire. That's not what most people are doing today. They're living for today rather than help preparing for a better tomorrow. And Americans cannot, should not, must not follow the bad example of the federal government, in many cases, other levels of government, with regard to how they handle their finances. You got to keep in mind, government doesn't have any money.
That's right.
Government, takes our money to differing degrees and spends it on various things. And government is not a model of economy, efficiency, effectiveness, and accountability. All right? I mean, it's just not. It does better in some areas than others. And it does provide some services that are absolutely essential that couldn't or shouldn't be provided by the private sector. So, we need to understand that. At the same point in time, we have strayed from a lot of the principles and values that made this country great. Things like limited but effective government, individual liberty, personal responsibility and accountability, rule of law and equal justice under the law, fiscal responsibility and intergenerational equity, just to mention a few. We've strayed from those. And we need to get back to those because they made us great, they can keep us great, and that we all have our responsibility to make sure that we're doing what we can for ourselves and for our families. And that's why I come back to COVID-19. 50% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. The gap between the haves and the have-nots has grown and is continuing to grow. And that is not right, but it's also something that could end up undermining domestic tranquility over time if we don't do something about it.
David Walker, one area we didn't talk about this morning is we have an important presidential election this year for 2020. And at one point, it looked like the U.S. economy was one of the strongest in U.S. history. Now I'm hearing it's one of the worst economies almost in U.S. history. What direction do you think President Donald Trump would be able to take the country into economically if he is reelected? And what, in your opinion, direction do you think former Vice President Joe Biden would take the U.S. economy if he is elected president?
Well, let's talk about a little bit there. Then I probably got another 5 or 10 minutes and I got to go. But before COVID-19 hit, the United States had the lowest unemployment rate in over 50 years, including in the minority community. Before COVID-19 hit, we had the longest continuous economic growth in modern history. Before COVID-19 hit, we had the highest stock values in history. Now, obviously, COVID-19 has had a devastating impact on all three of those things, okay? And I'm sure that, the president's people will probably try to point that out, okay? It's going to be a while before we get back to where we were. And hopefully we won't have a second round, but if we do have a second round, we'll learn the lessons from the first and have some type of a vaccine for it. I think this election is obviously COVID-19 is going to be part of it. Obviously the economy is going to be part of it. And obviously the president was in a lot better shape before COVID-19 hit. Okay. But I think what we're seeing now is that this election is likely to be more about what's the future generation, what's the future direction for America, and the Democrat, the activists in the Democratic Party now tend to be, more progressive, more liberal, call it whatever you want, than mainstream America. And the activists in the Republican Party tend to be, frankly, more conservative than mainstream America. That's part of the problem. That's one of the reasons I'm an independent. Okay, I mean, 42% of registered voters are unaffiliated, and we're largely unrepresented, except when you come to the general election. So I really think the election is likely to be more about what's the future direction of the country. It's obviously going to get off to a later start this year. Vice President Biden's not able to campaign right now. I mean, President Trump's not really able to campaign right now. We've all got our minds on the economy and on COVID-19. It's probably not going to get started in earnest until the earliest Labor Day at the earliest. Hopefully they'll have more debates this time than typically is the case. That's when people really tune in. Most people don't end up making their decisions until the last 2 weeks. All right. Although there's a wild card this year, in part because of COVID-19, you have a lot more jurisdictions thinking about doing mail-in ballots,
Right.
And allowing early voting. So we'll see. I mean, that's a real wild card.
All right. Great information.
Yes.
And hopefully viewers are listening, because you cannot keep shifting the weight of the responsibility for paying for all this to the next generation. Because if we're living from paycheck to paycheck today, then imagine what your kids are going to be doing, trying to pay for the things that we're walking away with now in this, living in the moment approach to our society. Mr. Walker, sir, I thank you so much for taking some time out of your morning. It's
Thank
early,
you.
but I thank you for tuning in and joining us.
Well, Stan, Jonathan, Victoria, thank you all, and have a good day. Stay
Thank
safe.
you. Take
All
care.
right.
Thank you, Dave.
God
You have a
bless
good
you. Bye-bye.
day.
All right, my friends. That's that is former comptroller of the United States, David Walker. Now, he was a candidate
Yes.
for not deputy,
Lieutenant
lieutenant governor, right?
Right.
Here
yeah.
in Connecticut, we have
Right.
our lieutenant governor.
Lieutenant governor. Yes.
No vice governor.
No
Like-
vice
like a
governor. No vice president. Yes.
vice
yes.
president.
Yeah.
No vice governor.
There you
Yeah.
go.
All right, and
Yeah,
you've
and he-
actually
and he-
had him on your program, Jonathan, on several occasions. So
Yeah,
he's,
like I
he's-
mentioned.
he's familiar with what we do.
It's
here.
interesting. He ran as a Republican, but he sounds like right now an independent.
He is an
He is
independent.
He is
Independent.
independent.
He's an independent at heart.
Yeah.
So, this is going to be interesting as we weave all of these things together down the road, because, of course, we're going to have now everybody in this area should be, if they're not familiar with Oz Griebel.
Right.
We're going to have Oz Griebel's going to come in another couple of weeks.
Yes.
And talk about an activity that he's undertaking
Yes.
called SAM, right?
Sam. Yes. Serve America movement.
Serve America movement, which focuses on the independents,
Right.
because most people now are independent.
Right.
There's a big swatch, like 50% of Americans
Right.
are independent. That means the other 50 are Republican and Democrat. So the independents really are the ones that are the biggest voice, but they don't really have any representation. So
Yeah.
how do you
They
get
don't really
that?
assert themselves in a way that they could and should.
Well, they don't have a party.
Yeah, that's it. And
There-
yeah,
There's no real means by which to.
there's no mechanism. Right.
Right. No mechanisms. I mean, I guess the nice, not the nice, but I guess the the benefit of having a party representative or a party representation is that it's like a union. You know, you got a big group
Right.
that then has representatives that actually represent the group.
Right.
Because I'm a registered Democrat, but I'm independently
Independently
thinker. So
that's right.
I buck the trend all the way around.
Me too.
I have no loyalty,
Right.
which is a problem when you're running for office.
Right.
I have no loyalty to the party. My loyalty is to the people.
Right.
To me, the party has the privilege of managing the people's government, but it's the people's government, not the party's government.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, the party's in charge of it. Just like it's the people's car, yeah, but I'm driving it.
Right.
Well, keep this in mind. The last time an independent had a major election here in Connecticut was Governor Lowell Weicker.
Right.
Up until that point, it's been mostly Republicans or Democrats.
Right.
But he was the only
Right.
only one who was able to
Breakthrough. And he was a former Republican,
yeah,
which is interesting.
yes, he was a former Republican.
Well, David Walker actually was a former Democrat also. He served under the Bill Clinton administration at one point as the U.S. General Comptroller. And then he switched to the Republican Party, and now he's an independent. So I think political clout is another big factor when you have a party system. It gives you an instant political representation. And I think trying to do it as an independent or the Green Party, you don't have that financial backing neither that you get when you're a part of the Democratic or Republican Party.
Well, and I think also, I think a lot of times with the independents, they run into, and I heard this a lot in the last election, as well, so-and-so's nice, but I don't want to waste my vote. So in the mind of the voter, they equate being an independent or unaffiliated as, the candidate, it's a wasted vote. And I told people, I said, the only vote that's a wasted vote is if you don't come out of your house to vote.
Right.
That's the wasted vote.
The wasted vote is the no vote. Some would contend that a no vote is a vote for status quo.
That's right.
Like if you're good with the way things are, you just don't vote.
Right.
But I think the unfortunate part, Vicky, Stan, that when you say you have an independent running like Oz Griebel, in most cases it usually ends up helping one candidate and hurting another candidate. I believe when Ross Perot ran for president, it ended up, I guess this was in 1992, I think it ended up hurting former President George Bush more and actually kind of helped President Bill Clinton. Usually, I'm just saying in my opinion, I think usually an independent candidate in a major election usually ends up hurting one political candidate and maybe helping another. Do you see it that way, Stan and Vicky? Is it?
Oh, well, I think when one candidate can get 50,000 plus votes as an independent, that says something. That says there's some dissatisfaction here. And that's what you have to pay attention to. 50 plus thousand people said, I don't like the current direction. We need to try something different. Now, if they had gotten far less,
Right.
then I would say, okay, yeah, that was just a statement run. But in this case, the statement was 50,000 plus people are dissatisfied with the direction of both parties here in the state. So what does that look like? What does that mean going forward?
Well, to your question about, does it hurt?
Right.
Does the independent hurt the Republican or the Democrat
That's my question.
candidate?
Right.
Yeah.
I guess from the Republican Party or the Democrat Party, it looks that way.
Right. Right. Yes,
The fact of
that's
the
right.
matter is, it helps the independents.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
So
right.
it's sort of like in a three-man race. Well, if you're in the race, you could win.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you're gonna diminish my chances of
Get
winning.
out of the race.
Well, then I mean, come on, really?
Yeah. And then they tell the independent, get out of the race. Well, why should he get out of the race?
Right. You got to get out
Wait,
of the race.
no,
'cause
why?
You're gonna
hurt my chances
hurt
here.
my chances. Well, I mean,
If your chances were good, you wouldn't have to worry about me anyway, right?
right. But you don't run
You're right.
to give somebody. You're running because you believe in the mission.
Right. And you want change to take place.
Right.
Yeah.
And you happen that if you're independent, you just don't want to be part of any political affiliation party like the Republican Party or the Democratic Party.
You don't want to be bound.
You don't want to be bound.
Right.
One thing, see, the way I look at it is this: if you run with party backing, if you win as a candidate for the party, then there is a certain element of obligation
Yes.
to carry forward
The party's agenda.
the party's agenda. The party is looking for someone to sit in the office of the mayor, in the office of the governor, in the office of the president. Okay, so the party needs leadership, needs political leadership to move the agenda of the party forward in serving the people's government.
Right.
All right, so the government is there, but who's going to manage the government? Who's going to manage the bureaucracy that is government? Representatives of the people. So in order to get representatives in there that you can hold accountable,
Right.
people create a party. And now if people don't toe the party line, if they don't take forward the party's agenda, you can sanction them.
Right.
You can't sanction an independent person.
No. The
What are you gonna
independent
do?
is free.
Threaten them with what?
With what? Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So the independent people become somewhat dangerous in terms of accountability to an overarching group. All right, that has political clout and muscle.
Right.
All right, you're responsible to the people who, in my nevertheless humble opinion, control the ultimate political power and muscle.
Right.
But parties have usurped that authority and that power. So now you have two competing parties. And sometimes, in my opinion, in my observation, the parties become like the Harlem Globetrotters. So, you've got, in theory, the best team in basketball, and in theory, the worst team in basketball, because the Washington Capitals never win. They never win.
They never win. That's right.
Right? The Globetrotters beat them every time. They almost always win, but they never quite make it. But it's all one franchise. It's all one big organization. So I
Yes.
mean, it's like the left hand trying to clap without the right. So it's bipartisan in a negative way,
Right.
not bipartisan because there was honest debate, back and forth, compromise, and now we agree to disagree on the things that we don't agree, but on the things that we've come to agree, we move together,
Right.
cooperatively on behalf of the people.
Cooperative politics.
Cooperative politics. So
Right.
in a lot of cases, it seems to be like a game, and we're
The pawns.
We're the pawns,
Right.
being moved around, and as Dave Walker said, we're the ones that are putting up the money.
Right.
It's our money. Government doesn't have money. It's our money
Right.
that they spend, and they come and get their money from you in the form of taxes.
Taxes, right.
It's not even a shakedown. They come and get it, and if you don't give it to them, they'll take
Lock
it
you
out
up.
of your
Lock you up.
out of your account. Like they have the power to lock you up.
Right.
Well, I mean, I would assume, Vicky, we're all Democrats. I don't know if you are.
Yes, I'm
Democratic.
a
Okay.
registered Democrat. Yes,
But-
but an independent thinker.
I'm an independent thinking Democrat
That's right.
Right.
That's the word. Right.
who's been in the past supported by the Republicans.
Yeah, you're a former Republican.
I was a
candidate.
Republican once, yes, many years ago. And then I realized that the Republican Party didn't really have an urban agenda.
Right.
And
So
many
I-
African Americans were Republicans
Yeah.
at one point in this country.
Right. So then I became a Democrat.
Right.
But and Hartford is an all Democrat town. And so if you were ever a Republican in Hartford, as far as Hartford's concerned, you're always a Republican.
Yeah.
Period.
Right.
It's like
There is no room for voices of dissension.
There's no room for voices of dissension, and there's no forgiveness.
That's right.
There's no forgiveness.
But unlike me and Vicky, you actually ran as a Democratic for mayor in Hartford, so you kind of know a little bit in the inside, the dirty secrets of certain things when you're running for office, and you're running as a registered Democratic Party. Do you find there's a benefit, obviously, when you're running as a Democratic Party here in Hartford for mayor?
Well, there's a political reality, and that is that if you are not a Democrat, you will not be elected.
Right.
Period. It's not going to happen. And to think otherwise is to be delusional.
Right.
All right, so if you're going to run for high office as anything other than a Democrat, you send a signal out to everybody that you are delusional. Okay. Period.
Yeah.
That's without question. Now, can you as a Democrat win without the apparatus of the party? No.
And
No,
I
no,
think
it's
at
just-
some
it's not
point,
gonna happen.
what do you think? I mean, at some point, if the demographics change in this city, and newer people move in, they might not all be Democrats at some point. At some point, that mechanism is going to break away.
It can only break away if the people who move in become a majority
Yeah.
plus one
Right.
more than Democrats.
Right.
And I don't see how that possibly happens.
Well, right now, it's
don't-
just, yeah,
I
we
don't
can't see it right
happening.
now.
It would have to be a huge shift.
Yeah.
The people in power, the people who control things in this city, are Democrats. Even if they're Republican-minded and Republican-leaning, they are Democrats, and they control the party apparatus, and that it's legacy. I mean, families would have to be uprooted and move out of the city. They had to move out of the state.
No, at some point, that is going to happen.
But not in the numbers, I think.
Yeah,
to
it is
offset.
going to
Yeah, I
happen.
mean,
Yeah.
while people may move out of the state, they're
Yeah.
not gonna abandon.
It sounds like they're living in the past to a certain degree.
They're not living in the past. They're very present in the now. They're not living in the past. They affect policy,
Yeah, I agree with that.
and they affect policy,
Right,
and they're in positions to execute
right,
policy. They're in positions to put people in power who
Right.
will carry out the desired
right.
will and agenda of the people that are power brokers. The problem,
It certainly does not help the rank and file here.
And I think sometimes it just comes down, like you say, independent thinker, or however you want to classify your abilities. Because last week we had State Representative Matt Ritter on, and he's a registered Democratic elected official. He comes from a family of Democratic base here in Hartford, and he seems like he is just consistent to me in many different areas. He's very reliable. He's very trustworthy. And I'm telling you, he just doesn't take people for granted. I mean, that's one of the biggest areas that I hear about the Democratic Party, is that they take the Democrats, the registered Democrats, for granted. I mean, if you know you got a locked-in voting block, you just assume that, hey, you can tell them anything that you want to tell them.
You can say anything to them. I mean, look at what happened last weekend with Vice President Joe Biden. Basically saying on an urban radio show that if you don't support him, quote unquote, you ain't black.
You ain't black.
well, I think that's distasteful
It is.
to say, but he got broad-based support from black people. And after he said that, they came
Well,
to his
I think
defense.
it was the certain elements within the Democratic Party, the older, more established black Democrats got out there and said, oh, no, wait, he's not like that. What I would have liked to have seen Joe say, and he should have said, Joe is like this uncle that comes at dinner, to Thanksgiving dinner. He always shoots off his mouth. You love him, but he shoots off his mouth, and he says the most uncomfortable things. And he doesn't really think sometimes what he's saying. What he should have said is not even brought race into it, but talk about his record. It sounded desperate, distasteful, desperate. Talk about your record as a senator. Talk about what the bills that you worked on, the legislation that you got through. Talk about your work as the vice president under the first African American president in this country. He should have said, look, I can match my record against Donald Trump in these areas. And he didn't even have to go in that way.
Well, I think that in fairness to the vice president, former vice president, if you take his comment as a standalone, then it sounds really, really bad. It's bad, period. I'm not making excuses for him.
I mean, who made
but
him
the
who made
comment
him
is
the
somewhat out of context because it's a closing comment at the end of a broader conversation. And so the analogy that you make of him being, Uncle Charlie. Here comes Uncle Charles.
Oh, here he
Uncle
comes.
Charlie,
Here he
he's going to
comes.
say something, and he's going to say something that's most inappropriate. How those two left feet of yours, well, that's right. I'm sorry, one of those isn't real. I mean, something stupid. So that, but if everyone uses that analogy because it so aptly fits the vice president, then you almost expect that. I mean, it's him. It's typical Joe. And so you expect him to say those kinds of things. I think his comment and him being, kind of, Dumbo in his comments and what do you call those gaffes?
Gaffes,
He's a gaffe generator. Is different than what you're talking about, Jonathan, in that he, in like Matt. Now, Matt genuinely is a nice person. He's a nice human being.
Yes.
He's personable.
Right.
He is courteous. He is in touch with his constituents.
Yes.
He is a good politician. I don't know anything.
He's conscientious.
He's conscientious. I don't know anything about him as a lawyer, but I would imagine he's a good lawyer as well. And so I think when it comes to the politician that serves you or serves me, we are generally in a good relationship with those individuals.
Right.
So when we talk about the party becomes this big nebulous entity that we think of as being detached. But it's not detached enough for you to vote against the person that may be your state senator, your state rep, your mayor, your council person, your board of ed person, because you have a good relationship with that person.
Right.
And so what happens, I think, is that good politicians understand the need to have a good relationship with their constituents.
Right. And they cultivate that.
And the constituency base is very, very broad.
Right.
So you may have broad-based African-American constituents that make up the majority of the people who live in your community, but you also have downtown businesses that are also part of your constituency, and you've got small businesses that are part of your constituency, and you have investors.
Right.
So there's a lot of different people who make up a constituency, and the politician has to, delicately balance giving attention to.
Everybody has to feel treasured.
Everyone
and
has
important.
to feel heard, treasured, important. They have to feel like our relationship's one-on-one.
Right.
And I think that the good politician does that well. Some politicians don't care.
No,
They just want the seat.
right.
So the title, the ones that are doing the people's business while attending to other things that government does seem to me to be more successful
Yeah, they are. They are more effective.
and more effective. But if you're ultimately you have the government you deserve, if the constituency base doesn't change or do anything, then you're gonna have an issue because you had made mention that if the demographic changes,
Right.
I don't think it's likely that the demographic is going to change. I don't think it's
No.
likely that like in Hartford, what we refer to as the five families or the royal families, they're not changing. Their holdings and their fingers are in many pies, and they're not taking their fingers out of those pies. But the attitude of the people,
Right.
that can change. And
Well,
if
I
the
think that's where
attitude
it
of the
happens.
people changes.
Well, I mean,
Politicians,
right.
they respond to the constituency.
Well, I
Right.
think the first thing we got to do is make sure we get our registered voters to turn out and vote. I mean, the numbers in our cities, capital city here at Hartford, other cities in Connecticut, in many cases are dismal when you get into particularly your local elections, your mayoral.
Well, that's your town committee.
Your town.
And I was on the Democratic Town Committee for the 7th District. You have to register people to vote.
Right.
That is why in our 7th District, we were able to pick up an additional seat, which puts us on parity with the 1st District, which probably now is washed away because that sort of work did not continue. Obviously, we weren't reelected. But that's the mechanism to do that. And if you're not doing that on a regular basis, consistently increasing your voter rolls, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And I think on some levels it is done intentionally to keep that vote low.
Well, I think that, and I could talk about this forever. I think that the idea, the notion that if we register more people, that they'll come out and vote.
It's not going to.
Well,
I don't necessarily think that that's I don't see that pair itself out.
Well, what I meant is really, if I didn't state it, is that the registered voters got to actually turn out to vote. And
We have to give them a reason to
give them a
vote.
reason
There
to
you
vote.
go. You
But
got to
have
give them a reason to vote.
But your civic duty is to vote, isn't it?
Well, I agree
civic
with that.
duty.
Totally.
People got all kind of civic duty.
Yeah.
You have civic
Jury
duty not to
duty.
shoot people.
Jury duty is civic duty.
Right. And how many people
Actually
actively
show
work
up
to get out of jury duty?
That's that's right.
They-
I don't want to
they
do
put
it. I don't
more
want to do it.
energy in getting out of jury duty than
Then actually
serving
going to
jury
serve
duty.
the
Yeah.
that's it.
So there's no guilt trip that your ancestors, particularly black people, died for your right to vote.
That guilt trip doesn't do anything for
That work-
anybody.
bro,
That's
no, the
not a
guilt-
way to motivate people.
No. I mean,
no.
you have to. I mean, if you think back to President Obama's election, what motivated all of us to come out to vote? You had a strong candidate with good ideas that was able to attract a broad base of voters. That's what,
That's true, but
yeah.
Black people turned out to vote for Barack Obama
Yeah, yeah,
because Barack Obama was black.
that's right.
The bottom line. The folk can say whatever they want.
That's right.
All right. There is a motivation
Right.
to do something because he would be the first African American president
Right.
in history. And it was something that many people of color always dreamed about or would fantasize about, but in their minds,
it wasn't a
was
reality.
never going to happen. It can't happen. And then it became something that was likely to happen, and then people were willing to stand in line
Yes.
through rain, through sun. It didn't matter.
Right.
Because here was an opportunity to make history.
Right.
Those kinds of candidates don't come along very often.
No.
People had a reason to vote. Now, is the plan for the city or a policy or whatever enough of a reason? I contend that people, if they're happy and satisfied, stay home. The biggest voting bloc are those who vote for the status quo because they're happy and satisfied. They stay home.
Right.
I can remember when I never even thought about voting. It was the last thing from my mind.
That's hard to believe, though.
Oh, it may be hard to believe now, but I mean, I remember when I lived in Bloomfield, I didn't even know who the mayor was.
Right.
Interesting. Wow.
I didn't know who I didn't care.
Yeah.
I owned a house. I went to work. I came home. We went on vacation. You did the things you do, and you don't care who the mayor is.
Oh.
I no more cared who the mayor was than who the dog catcher was. It didn't matter. It was a non-factor. I was living my life.
Right.
I didn't go to bed wondering what the policies were going to be or what somebody was going to vote on or, my kids, took them to school. I picked them up from school. I didn't go to any board of education meetings. It didn't even occur to me to go to a board of education meeting. Getting involved in things in Hartford, it occurred to me that there seems to be a power working against the greater good at a higher level. It seemed to me to be, elected officials could do so much more if they were motivated to do so. And
Right.
that's when I started looking at things a little bit differently and started getting involved in, you hear so many people complain if you're out in the community
Right.
covering events. And it's like, well, gee whiz, people are complaining about stuff, but why doesn't anything ever get done?
I think it's a level of frustration too with the people. It's like what you just said is, yeah, I see something wrong here. What can I do about it? I mean, I'm powerless. I feel like I'm powerless to do anything.
Yeah.
And that's the feeling of a lot of people.
Well, that's the key. If you feel like you powerless, then you actually become powerless. And I think
All
that's
starts in the mind.
the mentality. But one thing I want to just follow back on when you're saying that the black people voted for Barack Obama because they saw this black candidate that could become president. What was the difference between that approach and that attitude when Jesse Jackson was running for president? Well, he never actually officially got nominated so that's kind of answers the question.
Right.
Right there.
Well,
Barack
Jesse was
Obama
different.
became the nominee
Right.
for
That's-
the
that's-
party.
that's the
Well,
big
I think
difference.
all of those, I mean, you go back even further, Shirley Chisholm ran, but she was
Right.
not the nominee. I think all of
Right.
these are all layers. And I think at that point, by the time Barack, came on the scene, I think that even as a people, we became more sophisticated in terms of voting and the kind of candidate we were looking for. Barack did not come up through the traditional civil rights, mechanism, like Jesse.
That's true. Black people voted for.
Jesse
Well,
was a statement also. Jesse, was, okay, we know he's not going to win, but let's just get behind him.
Right,
Okay.
Run Jesse,
Run,
was it
Jesse, run.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
Run, Jesse, run. Remember? And it was interesting because even his white supporters, I can remember Senator Ernest Hollings telling him, look, Jesse, run. Just run.
Well, I think that there should be no. In my observation is, yeah, black people voted for Barack. But black people wasn't the reason Barack got elected.
Right.
If Barack Obama did not have the support of white America,
Right.
he would never have gotten elected.
Right. I think the black vote was just the gravy.
Right. And so
And-
when I
and-
say black people voted for him because he was black, I mean to suggest that there was a motivating factor for people of color
Right.
to come out in numbers like you had never seen.
Yeah, it was interesting. And they weren't all black either. I mean, you had Asians, you had Arab Americans,
Right,
you had
right.
Latinos. You had a lot of different people who were, very quiet, but they came out. But they came out because they had a reason to come out.
Well, if you have a candidate that ignites an interest in the constituency, people will vote.
Right.
So, you have to find out what that is. And, if you like a particular type of food, why should you abandon what you're going to eat tonight? Simply because I suggest you should try something different.
Right.
You know, and well, I guess maybe it would be good, but I don't like artichokes. Well, just try them.
Right.
I don't like them. Have
How do you
ever
know? Have you tasted them?
You never tasted them. I know I'm not going to like them because I don't like the way they look.
Right.
So why would I eat them? Besides, I'm happy with my spinach. I've been having spinach this way forever, and so it's. I think that if you have something that you want to add to the mix, if you have something that you think is so great in terms of political ideas, that it's up to you to sell that. And maybe what one needs to do is sell it to the party.
Problem is, the party isn't interested in listening.
Is it? You know, if just, you know, I think that like any organization, you know, if Johnny come and join the first church of the do's and the don't do's, and the church is 150 years old, and he comes in there talking about all these changes that need to be made.
Whoa, wait a minute.
Now hold on, Johnny. You need to sit down and at least come to Bible study for 2 years before you start coming up in the pulpit talk about what need to change. Same thing for the party.
Right.
How are you going to just join the party and now all of a sudden you got all the bright ideas? I think that you have to be a contributor.
Right.
Any organization.
Right.
I don't care what it is, a workplace. And you have to present yourself as one who's going to be willing to work with. And, you know, I think that's just reality. And if you're willing to, you know, I was told many times, why don't you just run for city council?
Yeah.
You just run, you know.
Well,
You
there
know,
are
if
other
you
people
run for
that
city
there are other
council
people,
and let people get to understand and know you from in political terms, you're an untested.
But it's interesting that you say that because the current occupant didn't do all of that.
Right.
Luke Bronin did not run for city council.
That's right.
But Luke Bronin is a political operative. You don't need to run for city council if you can be counted on to carry the water for those who are in power.
Yeah,
So,
correct.
you know, city council is a great way to come in if you don't have those kinds of connections.
Well,
You know, Johnny might not be able to come up there and join the church. But the granddaughter of the pastor, well, that's a whole nother matter.
That's right. That's right.
And she gonna be the first woman pastor of this
That's
church, right? Well, how can she do this? She's because she has a relationship. And at
Carrying
the end
the
of
water.
the day, politics is all about.
Well, Stan, don't take this the wrong way or don't take it personal, but from what I was hearing when you was running twice and people was telling you to run for city council, the word on the street was that you had a more realistic chance of being elected as a city council than you did mayor. I think people just wasn't going to vote for you, and that's just like a scapegoat to tell you to run for city council.
I was told straight out to run for city council. I mean, I have a very good friend of mine, I won't mention any names, told me it to my face, not only aren't you going to win,
Yeah,
when you lose, you're not going to have anything.
right.
All right?
As if losing was everything, you know? I mean,
Well, this was back when I used to have a job. Then
Yeah.
I got, you know, I lost my job, everything else. But at the end of if you're on the outside, you have no concept.
Right.
right.
None. Running gives you an idea of what goes on. I have no idea of what goes on within the party. I have a very good idea of what happens when you actually run for office. Anyone that's run for office understands
Right.
what it is to be a candidate. And being a candidate is it's a lot of fun actually. It's if you like challenges and you like to meet people and if you're an all-in kind of person, running for public office, I would encourage anybody to run for public
That's
office.
right.
Just run.
Just run. Right.
Because it's a great experience and you get to understand that most of your neighbors and friends are just like you. Everybody's really the same. They want the best for their kids. They want the best for their families, their moms, their dads, their husbands, wives, their significant others. People just want a good quality of life. They want to be respected. And people aren't that much different. They may have different color skin. They may be different gender, different persuasions, all these kinds of things. But at the heart of it, they're just people. They just
It's
trying
the human
to
experience.
just trying to live. And I think that if people respected one another more, we would all get along better and we would be more willing to compromise. It's
Right.
not a fight for my way. It's a fight for a better quality of life.
Right.
And I think that gets lost
Yeah.
in everybody.
It's not a Democratic answer. It's not a Republican answer.
Right.
It's
So
the
if
right
you're not on
answer.
the team,
That's right.
Yeah.
we're gonna burn your house down.
That's right.
And
Run
that-
you out of town.
Right. Run you out of town. You should even be in town.
Don't even consider it.
Right.
Right. You need to move tonight. So that attitude I think is not good. But run for city council.
Run for the Board of
Yeah.
Education.
Right. I mean, I've had people tell me if you'd have ran for city council like we asked you the first time, things might be totally different.
But but I think it comes down to you just not interested in running for city council. I mean, if you really want to run for city council, you know how to prepare yourself and run for city council.
I don't think it should be an either or. I think anybody should be able to get out there, and if they want to run for mayor, if they want to run for city council, they shouldn't be bound by anything. Just do it.
You're not bound. So whether or not if you're running to run, if you're running to make a statement, if you're running for the principle, if you're running because you really think you can win, all that is great. But if you want to be part of the political process, even if you win as an independent, you're up against a tremendous machine that pushes back against you.
Right.
You can use the current occupant of the White House right now, and all of the forces that are against him from
Right.
all sides, both
Right.
parties.
Right.
He is an outsider.
Right.
And so as an outsider trying to move a system that's very bureaucratic, you're one man, one woman against a mighty tide.
And they're angry that he did it.
Of course they're angry. So now you don't even have people working with you.
Yeah.
Everyone's working against
How
you.
dare you do this? How dare you buck the system? This wasn't supposed to happen.
It isn't supposed to happen.
That's
And the system kicks back. It's like a spark plug that won't fire right.
Right.
So the system kicks back. And, disruptor maybe might reset the system.
Right.
But the system is,
Well, I'll tell you, it was a real interesting race, the last mayoral race here in Hartford. You made the front page of the Hartford Current News. That was a tremendous, story that they wrote about you. Former Mayor Eddie Perez decided to come back and run for office. And Mayor Luke Bronin had a tremendous endorsement. And, well, he had the endorsements, but he had a tremendous, commercial campaign strategy that he was just on commercials.
the mayor's campaign strategy was
He didn't do very much door knocking, I can tell you that much.
Well, his staff was coming by. His staff came
He
by
had-
Yeah,
three
but
times.
He wasn't
He wasn't
he
directly from.
he
No.
is the incumbent. And the fact of the matter is, all incumbents are very, very hard to beat.
beat.
Right.
Period.
I mean, they really have to
Unless
stub
they
their
set
toe.
themselves on fire
Right.
and run through town without clothes on, it's very, very difficult to come up with
That
something
may actually be an advantage.
so scandalous that they're going to wind up being out of office.
That's right,
It's
yeah.
just not going to happen.
Right.
And so you have millions of dollars in free ads simply because he opens his mouth and speaks, just like the President of the United States does.
Right.
All right, he's got Air Force One. He can fly anywhere he wants. He can say anything he wants. He can command the audiences at nauseum, even if it's disingenuous, bold-faced lie. Everyone heard him.
That's right.
So you're always in the news. There's such a thing as, all press is good press as long as it's about you.
That's right.
So,
That is his motto.
and that is his motto. It's
Right.
been his motto before he became president.
Right.
There's nothing he's doing now that's different than what he did before. So everyone acting all shocked and all just
If you watched
disingenuous.
him
Right.
in New York City as a developer.
Yeah,
that was
New
his-
York Post. I mean,
Yes.
this
Page
is what,
6.
right. And so it's always something in the news about him. And when you go into the booth, the number one person people vote for in the voting booth is the name they recognize.
That's right.
Yeah.
They look for a name. They scan the ballot. When they see a name they recognize, that's where they go. So if you're the incumbent, it's very hard to beat the incumbent because the incumbent generally isn't doing anything that people are up in arms about. There's always a small contingent of people who don't like what's going on. The loyal opposition is always going to be challenging. But is there enough to defeat the guy? I could say without fear of contradiction, no. Because it's a historical fact.
Yeah.
No. There was not enough out there to defeat the current mayor, and he had $1 million+ dollars.
Oh, yeah.
And so it is about the money more so than the message.
It's message, money, and means,
Yes.
manpower. He can have, with his money, it becomes even more difficult to beat him.
Right. And I think
It was
that's
going to
what's
be
changed.
difficult if he didn't have the money.
And that's
It
what's
would have been
changed in this
difficult.
city, because it was a time when we didn't have that, going back many, many years.
But
But the incumbent still wasn't beat.
But
I
we-
mean, you know,
Well,
Eddie
let's see.
Perez stayed in office
Yeah.
until he
The
resigned.
only time I think was when, what is it, Carrie
Carrie
Saxon was the one that really,
You know,
She,
the people's, what was it, the People's Party, I can't remember what it was.
Well-
People for Change.
right. She won. She beat the system, but Carrie was not
Right,
a nobody,
right,
and she had political. She was a former state representative,
correct.
so she had political
Base.
base,
Right,
and she used the church,
right.
used the churches. Then she instituted a lot of stuff that the church was not in favor
Oh,
of.
yes, I remember.
So, you know, very progressive.
Yes, progressive, yes.
Progressive.
Yes, very much so.
Very, very much so. And the conservative church, by nature, was not happy with the things that she did.
Right.
And, you know, so, you know,
And that's going to
using
happen. Yeah,
constituency to get you one place and then not being loyal to that constituency.
yeah. Right.
But I think a better example actually was when Thurman Milner, former Mayor Thurman Milner, defeated George Atherton.
Yeah.
Because I think many people didn't really think that was going to happen. I think when Carrie Saxon Perry won, she had really the support of Mayor Thurman Milner.
Yeah,
He
Thurman
had
laid the
already
groundwork.
laid the ground. I think it was
Right.
really historical.
And both of them were weak mayors.
Right.
That's
They
another
certainly
key, yeah.
weren't under strong mayor.
They were both weak mayors. And
She acknowledged that. She said, I can't get anything done.
Right. If you talk to Mayor Milner,
Right.
when he got into office,
Yes.
nothing was there.
That's right. Setting them up for failure.
Paperwork gone.
That's right.
Gone. And he was a ceremonial mayor.
That's
Right.
right.
All right. So
The city manager in those days had the
right.
power.
Right. City manager had the power. So then you had to really use strategery to move things forward.
Right.
But one would say, what's the legacy of quote unquote black politics in Hartford as a result of Thurman Milner and Carrie Saxon Perry? What is the legacy?
Largely ceremonial.
Right. So where's the political legacy? What gains were made for African Americans in the city?
Right.
So those are the things by which you judge the caliber of success. It's not just to be in office.
Anybody can do that.
Right. You don't want to just be in office for the sake of a title. You want to be able to accomplish something.
Right. You want to have the power to do it and be able to do it.
Well, it's kind of ironic because Carrie Saxon Perry was the last African American black mayor here in Hartford. She lost in 1993.
But she was a weak mayor.
Right, weak mayor.
Yeah. So there's been no strong
No.
black mayor.
No, she was a weak mayor, and her people stabbed her in the back
Plain and simple.
when she got in, and then they undermined her. So, being in the position of power is only as good as your ability to wield the power in a way that's going to be constructive and move an agenda forward, back to our agendas, but move an agenda forward for your constituency. Otherwise,
She was not able to do that. Right.
Otherwise, it's of no value. From my observation, from what I've been told, from what I've gleaned over the years and talking to different people about all this stuff, the real strong mayor of color that would have been brown skin would have been Colin Bennett.
Oh.
Yeah, I believe it. Yes.
But the rules were changed from strong mayor to weak mayor because it was projected that he would become mayor in the next election.
Oh, I never realized that, Colin.
So there are a lot of powers at play. So politics is
And
not.
he was a Republican.
Yes.
Interesting.
Right. Politics isn't, be nice to me is my turn sport. It's what replaces all-out anarchy and war and fighting for everything. We agree to disagree. We come together in consensus and we move agendas forward. And so it's not just I want somebody to be in power that looks like me. If they can't get in, they don't deserve to be there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you have to come up with ways to touch lots of different people because at the end of the day, it is about all of us.
And you can still have the right program, but if people are still that mindset that they're going to go with the person that's there, it doesn't matter.
Right. And I would submit this for your consideration as well. Just because someone that looks like you isn't in office doesn't mean you can't use the political apparatus to serve an agenda that you put together. If it's put together well, there's not a lobbyist up on the hill that has somebody in office. They write the bill,
Right?
find funding to move the bill forward.
Right?
They lobby,
That's right.
and then they get what they want done using government. Constituents can do the same thing.
That's right.
You would think you wouldn't have to because you had an election, but the election for most people ends after they cast their vote. They go on about their business.
Right. They don't understand that there's a continuity that has to happen. It's just not enough to just send them to the job. You got to stay on them after they get the job.
Yeah.
Case in point, we had library closures in the Blue Hills neighborhood. And, one of the things that I said to people who were in political position, I'm like, well, wait a minute now. You live in the neighborhood. Why aren't you speaking out about this? And unfortunately, there was some tippy-toeing in that. And I said, for every day that these kids don't have a library, we're sentencing them to getting into trouble. And then there were organizations such as Blue Hill Civic that got involved and really pushed the politicians. They weren't going to do anything. They were okay with, they were talking out of both sides of their mouth. Yeah, well, I'm in favor of, I'm not really so sure about, library. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Come up with a plan. If you don't like somebody's plan, come up with your own plan. They couldn't come up with their own plan, but eventually political community pressure is what pushed them and the library officials, us working together, putting a library in Rawson School. Now, is that an answer to the problem? Short term, yes. Long term, no. Long term, the goal is to have a library, a freestanding structure, just like they have on Park Street.
And that can happen
That's
as
right.
long as the community continues to be present and put
Right.
pressure on the elected officials. So it's your government.
That's right.
And so you make your government work for you.
Yeah.
And it's a lot more than just voting.
Right.
Yeah.
The government is going to be there anyway.
Yeah. You
So it
can't be
doesn't
passive.
matter whether you voted for them or not.
Right.
They're there. They
That's right.
fought to get the job.
you can't be
so this is
passive.
what I want. Here's how I intend to get it. This is the plan I see that is viable. I have some people with me who are supportive of it. When can we sit down and meet and work on getting this thing done?
Right.
And that's how you have to approach it.
That's right. That's right. From a position of strength and not a position of weakness.
Right.
But,
Right.
But so you have to be involved. You have to be educated
Right.
and knowing what you're doing, and you have to be consistent. Because if somebody rejects your proposal, don't answer or respond back to you,
There's always a plan B.
A plan
a
B.
plan B, a plan C, and a plan D.
Well, you're a you're a guest booker,
yes.
right? Mm-hmm. If folk tell you they don't think that they can make it, you push them a little bit more and find out until finally they can't say no to you.
Yeah.
And then they're here. It's no different
That's right.
than if you're buying a car or anything else. instead of buying a car or booking a guest or trying to get a room or get what you want at the restaurant that says they don't serve the particular food you want, or a supermarket that doesn't carry your
Vegetables.
vegetables. You push. It's the same thing with your elected officials.
You have to push.
You have to push. If they tell you, well, I don't know if we can do that.
What do you mean?
No, wrong answer. let's find a way. So, what do I need to do to change your mind?
That's right.
Well, there's nothing you can do. How about I get a petition started to replace you?
That's right.
Yeah.
Will that motivate you?
That's right. Yeah.
Will
How about
that
we
motivate
run some
you?
more candidates against you
okay.
next
Well,
time?
all right.
Let's sit down.
Let's sit down
Okay,
and
yeah.
let's sit down and talk. Okay. So you start the negotiation process. I think the real question is, do you want something bad enough? I don't expect you to just take people off the street, start educating them about the things they don't even think they know they need, they want. But there's plenty of people in the community who know what they want.
That's right.
For whatever reason, they may not realize how to go about it.
Right.
So if it's something that government can help with,
Right.
then go to your elected officials. And if one city council person tells you no, call up another one.
There's
Because in
9 of
Hartford
them.
we have nine, and they represent the entire city.
That's right. They are
They don't-
councilmen at large.
Councilmen at large. They don't just represent your neighborhood or the neighborhood they live in. They represent the entire city.
And they have to be educated about the issues in the city. If there's something that's affecting your neighborhood and you don't like it, shoot them an email, pick up a phone, go down. They all have offices that are taxpayer supported,
Yeah.
funded. Go
And-
sit in their office, talk to them.
And usually the first step is you're gonna have to go through their executive assistant
Well,
when you're
even
trying
so.
to reach them. That's gonna be your main
That's all right.
starting point.
Yeah.
But
That's
then-
not my first step.
I
I
go
call
right
them
directly.
up directly.
That's
I don't,
right.
I'm never going.
I
through
know
an
all the
executive
I know
assistant.
some of
Well,
the
maybe as a
executives.
guest book, it's a little different. I just but even politics. But as a guest booker, you have to go through their scheduler and things on that level. But I do go sometime
Well,
directly
that's
to them
true.
too.
I guess
But-
we're talking.
Yeah,
I don't
but-
mean not as a. I don't mean as a guest booker, as a constituent.
Constituent,
Right,
yeah.
right.
As a constituent, you could call your elected official.
Right.
They may say, "Call my assistant, and we can book a time."
Right,
Or they control my schedule.
right.
Yeah.
But when they were running for office, they came to your house.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
They
They
didn't
knocked
have an
on
assistant.
your door.
That's right.
Their assistant didn't come. They came.
Right.
You didn't vote for their assistant.
No.
You voted for them.
You voted for them. You don't want to be arrogant and high-minded and heady, but,
Well, that's
I
all.
didn't have you talk to my assistant when you asked me for a vote
Or a check for your contribution
or
to
a
your
check
campaign.
for your contribution. That's right. I've had requests for contributions to campaigns right now.
Well, it seems to be a trend. Obviously, when a candidate is running for office, they're usually more easy and accessible, and they're willing to listen to you more and a little bit longer. But
I think it
once-
depends on the individual.
The individual,
candidate.
too, that's
You know,
right.
the candidate
The
has to
candidate.
set the tone. And he or she can say, "Hey, wait a minute. You guys got me here. Now I want to keep that up." Now you have to have an open door policy. If you don't do that, then you got all this other stuff that's.
Right.
So the candidate sets the tone when they're running, and then once they get in office, they set the tone.
But I will still tell you, your registered voters and even just your citizens, they have to be educated. I'm like, oh, okay, things.
All right, let's take a short break, and our guest is here. So we're going to take a break, and we'll pick this up on the other side of the break with our next guest. Stick and stay, don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
And you know what?
Yeah, okay.
Can I say one more thing? I forgot to say. So I want a message for the kids. In life, you can choose the good and the bad. Fortunately, some people don't have a choice. I lost my daughter to cancer, and she didn't have a choice. You do. We hear you. We feel you. We are you. This is our community. This is our promise.
Hello, My name is Destiny King. I am a member of the Hartford Communities That Care Youth Leadership Academy in the Young, Educated, and Determined to Succeed program. Over the past 27 weeks, I have been examining the intersections between education, poverty, violence, and trauma to develop policy and program recommendations. I served on a poverty work group, and the following is our recommendations. Organize resources to support entrepreneurs, expand efforts to provide highly qualified mentors for teens, to place priority on investments in affordable, high-quality childcare and early education, focus on giving people the tools to start new enterprises that will improve their circumstances and spur economic growth, as well as removing barriers to small business growth, repair and strengthen the safety net to make sure there are safeguards in place that apply equally to all people, reduce the large gaps between the very rich and the rest of society and make it easier for people to get into the middle class. Also, to address the gaps that persist for African Americans in educational attainment, employment, wages and income, family wealth and home ownership, health and infant mortality, and incarceration. Thank you for your time, and I hope you can support our recommendations.
Love yours.
This is more than just a message, but a message from the heart. You know, I live in Hartford. I was raised in Hartford, so I know what you guys are going through. It's important that we change because a lot of you will end up dead or in jail. It's sad to say, but you know, I have a lot of friends that grew up with me and we all chose different paths. You know, I feel like I'm on a better path right now, but a lot of my friends aren't here with me today. We hear you, we feel you, and we are you. This is our community, and this is our promise.
Okay, my friends, welcome back. It's the morning talk. No bumper music in. How you doing, Jonathan? You okay? Huh? You okay there?
Morning talk.
Right.
Keeping it moving.
There we go. Give you a little mic so people can hear what you actually say.
Oh, okay. That's much better.
There you go. There you
Make
go.
sure
There
you
you
hear me and everything. Well, we had an interesting conversation though. The last hour, pretty much, we talked.
Well, you like
politics.
talking about politics and stuff like that.
I do.
But first hour guest was pretty good, Joey.
David Walker.
Dave Walker.
Right.
So, all right. Well, now we're going to shift gears a little bit. Talk a little bit about something that is. I'm excited about this because I'm an all-in kind of guy, which is why I don't do golf. I'm scared of playing golf.
No.
Yeah, I'm scared because if I do it, that's all I would do. I could become easily obsessed with trying to get the perfect.
I just started about a year ago, and
no, I'm
I
too
love
much
it.
all in.
I'm encouraging other women to get out there and play golf. A lot of women are playing golf. I love it.
Well,
And I
see,
mean,
you know how to moderate. It seems like you play golf for fun.
I do. I do it for relaxation purposes, concentration.
See, I can't relax. If I get out there, I'm gonna want to be better than I was the day before, which means.
But that's good. That's all part of a good golfer, because you're constantly getting better.
You don't understand. It's like fishermen. You're always out there on the open
Looking for that
sea
big catch,
fishing.
huh?
Yeah. Just one thing leads to the next. I don't know. But this weekend we had a very interesting thing happen in terms of golf. But we're going to talk a little bit about sports. We have with us Joe Zone, who is the sports director for WFSB Channel 3 here in Hartford, Connecticut, and statewide. Channel 3 is
Statewide.
Channel 3 is at the top of the food chain, I think.
Yes, it is.
All right? Is that
Over 60 years?
Yeah, I
think
think
you all have been?
I think that's fair
Yes,
to say.
and doing huge things, By the way, thank you for having me in,
Thank you
just
for
to get
coming.
out. And I have been out there doing things other than sports, but we have another face mask giveaway today. We've given over 100,000 face masks away around the state in various, and it's been well received.
That's the Mask for Connecticut
yes,
program?
exactly. By the way, let's get back to the golf for a second.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you talk about the golf. I played Thursday, Sunday, and Monday, and I got worse every day. So it's not about getting better, believe me.
Okay.
But you're trying to
You
get
can
better.
try
though.
to get better, but the great thing about playing golf right now is just being outside.
Yes.
You can social distance golf in a good way, and walking the course. A lot of the fact that they want you to split up carts, usually 2 in a cart, now 1 in a cart, so maybe no cart and walk. So the golf has been great, and the fact that you've just taken it up, it's fantastic, because I have been playing golf since I was 13, and I am far worse than I was when I was 25, but I'm still out there anyway and loving it.
Yes.
Well, COVID-19. I check out the Current every day.
Yes.
I spend about an hour and a half, 2 hours going through the Current every morning. And in the sports section, they give you the day, since it's almost like sports it didn't die, but
Yes.
it's kind of like sports has been on this indefinite pause.
Yes.
And
It's changed
It's-
a little bit. And even the players have kind of gotten a little more, they've adapted to the change. They realize they can't go out and do what they normally would do, so they have found other ways to contribute.
Well, sports is such a huge part of our society.
Yes.
And you got like Hollywood, you've got the entertainment industry, but then you also have sports, and
The business.
sports is kind of like that neutral place where everybody can come together, no matter what it is that you are, and you can rally around something, and it's just. And I don't know how to really explain it,
It's a friendly rivalry too, and some with teams.
but with what's happened in sports, in what way do you see sports impacted by all of this? In that, will it ever be like it was?
I haven't done a sportscast since like March 15th. The last big sports story in this state, there were 2 of them about the same time, but when the CIAC, the people who run high school sports in Connecticut, decided right before the quarterfinals in basketball to end the season. That was a huge story that day. I think it was on a Monday or a Tuesday, and there was so all the seniors and all the players who didn't get a chance to play their championship game went down to Cheshire, where the CIAC was, had a little rally, I call it, a lot of parents there. They wanted to play. How could you do this to us? The next night, the NBA shut down its entire season. So while the CIAC was getting criticized at that time, why they were so far ahead of the curve on this. So all of those kids lost the chance to play for championships for the winter sports. So the next thing up now is spring sports in Connecticut. Shut down. That's gone. So the big question now is, what's going to happen in the fall? Will these kids get there? And by the way, along the way, UConn women and UConn men, both with chances to play at Quinnipiac. So many colleges had a chance to also do things. Everything shut down. It was unbelievably devastating. And that's just in our state. So now, are they even going to be able to play sports in the fall? And they're not going to be able to do that unless the kids are going to school in the fall. Because if you're not in school, the kids aren't going to play. So that's a huge story. So the state was crushed. Then the NBA goes down, the NHL goes down, spring training baseball with all of the baseball fans in the state, Red Sox, Yankees, Mets fans, that's shut down. Nobody is playing sports. So now they're trying to figure out ways, how can we get these games back on? Almost everybody's saying we're going to do it without fans. No fans in the stands. Our golf tournament, which is in 3 weeks, the Travelers, it'll be the third of 3 they're going to do for just TV. No fans. After that, the PGA will look at it and say, can we bring some fans? But fanless sports events, if you think about it, I mean, sports is all about the fans.
Right.
Fans being in the building.
Right.
You know, obviously you can watch it on TV, but
It's not the same like being there.
can you imagine college football? 110,000 people at Penn State. 115,000 at Ohio State, Michigan, the big places. How are you gonna social distance that crowd?
Yeah.
I don't think you can.
Well, Joe Zone, obviously another sport we didn't talk about, I mean, we just scratching the surface, is the Major League Baseball. I know you cover the New York Yankees. I know you cover locally here, the Boston Red Sox. Is the Major League Baseball season going to be postponed, or they're going to start at some point?
There is a plan that the owners have where they would play 81 games. So that's half the season, starting in July, around the 4th of July weekend. Fanless to start. No players in the dugouts. They'd sit in the stands behind home plate. Umpire, everybody, all the players have to be tested. They will make the divisions in the East, so the crossover National Americans, so the Mets, the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Pirates, the Phillies play each other, which reduces plane travel and all that travel time, keeping them out of that environment. The question is, are the players on board to do this? Because the owners also want a revenue sharing experience. So whatever we make, you share in that. If we don't make, you don't share. And so far, the players have not signed off on that. But it would be 81 games. That's half the season. They'd add some playoff teams, and they would try to do it fanless. They'll be the first major. I mean, obviously, NASCAR was out, fanless. They've done some events. But the first, the NBA still hasn't said we're done. And the NHL is thinking about maybe playing playoff games in the summer. But baseball is the first big experiment in terms of, because they'll be up next, right? They should be playing now, obviously, but they're going to try to go in July, half the season. Players have to sign off. And again, you're going to see it on TV. You're not going to be able to go to the ballpark and see it, at least in the immediate future. And I think the whole thing depends on, the vaccine. Anybody who goes to a sporting event, are you going to be comfortable sitting in the stands with 200 people packed in around you for the next time you want to go to a sporting event? I don't. Some people will. Some people won't.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, how is that? I mean, even just the crowd control. I mean, are they going to sit there and take everybody's temperature as you come into the gate there? I mean,
well, I think you could say those 3 people get row A, row B. It's an enormous
a lot of coordination
problem. Yeah, exactly. And
because it seems the model of the stadium and for the owners is to get as many people in there, fannies in the seat, right?
That's
That's
especially baseball. Especially baseball. Football is all about the TV money.
Yeah,
NFL,
right.
They think they can go, and everybody would watch NFL games whether there's a fan in the stands or not, because of fantasy football, because you have your favorite team. TV does a great job with it, and most people watch football anyway without going to the games.
The
But
fan experience, the concessions, the food,
all those employees
employees
who are
who-
not going to
yeah.
work. Yeah.
Well, I guess stadiums you could what? I guess you could remove seats, but
That's
you know
amazing.
that's
That's an
a
expense.
huge
Yeah.
undertaking.
I don't
and
know if they would
you
remove.
know,
I think what they would do is say, again, you three people sit in row A,
Yeah.
you three people sit in row C, and you know you
Yeah,
can
kinda
but-
stagger it, yeah.
But how many people does that allow you to put into a stadium? Is even worth the effort to do that?
Right.
Right. And will people? How do you police that? And I can see
Right.
people all moving as far forward as they possibly
Yeah,
can because
that's right.
you've got empty seats.
Well,
And you know,
if somebody said, we're going to close this thing down if you don't stay where you're supposed to stay, I think that would probably work for most people. I would think they would probably have to eliminate alcohol sales because then sometimes people's inhibitions disappear and
Yeah.
they might be. But I think that if somebody became an issue with social distancing, the rest of the fans who want to be at the game are not going to allow that to happen,
Yeah.
and it's certainly, you know, you'll
Which
have
can
security.
create its own problems.
No, really,
Yeah,
you're right.
really.
Yes.
But Joe, how do you actually feel, I mean, as a sports director? I mean, is your role going to change if the baseball season starts and there's no players to interview? I mean, doesn't that kind of affect how the whole broadcasting industry is operating under?
I think that it is going to change certainly in the near. For instance, let's use the Travelers, because that's the first big in-state event that's
Right,
coming
next
up.
month, Next month, right.
Well, at Channel 3, at Channel 8, a couple of us, we do half-hour shows on Thursday and Friday.
And you're on location there, right?
And we're there, but not, when I say we, I'm talking 30 people from Channel 3 would have credentials to cover that in various ways. Are we going to get 30 credentials this year?
No.
If we get 5, I'd be surprised. Now, that will not be up to the Travelers. Apparently, the PGA is going to determine how much media can be on site. But when we cover these events, we're in a trailer, and there might be 200 media people in it at a time with desk, chairs, at tables right next to each other. That's where they all do their work. So now do they go to, each station gets 2 people, one who works mornings, one who works nights? Will they have a pool reporter, one station a day, who gets to ask the questions for everybody? And that's just the Travelers we're talking about. Now, on the other side of it, I think as TV people, we become a little more valuable because now all the people who would have gone have to depend on the TV highlights.
Right.
And I think that's even going to be more true for high school, you know, especially high school football. If they're going to tell people, you know, only parents can come maybe, or they're not going to let anybody in for the first month, well then our coverage as the media and the TV highlights will become a real big part of it. But interviews, I mean, right now I'm doing stories. I have a microphone that's 6 feet long, a pole 6 feet. I'm holding out here. I've got a mask on. It's uncomfortable. My glasses fog up as soon as I get outside with that mask on. So our role is definitely, how we do our job is going to change. But it's hard for the sports guys to do everything from home because you still need to have access to the highlights, even the ones we don't shoot ourselves, which we do. You have network feeds that come into the building. They're now going to be able to send Mets and Yankees highlights to my house so I can do a sportscast from my house. Or to some, it's definitely going to change, and I can see it. Now, the other thing is there are some things that we can do from home that we didn't do before. Like I have not even been into the TV station, but maybe 3 times in the last 12 weeks because I'm doing everything from my house. I have a camera in my car right now, microphone. I go out, I do my interviews, shoot my stories, go back to my computer at home, send them back to the TV station, wait for them to tell me where to go next.
Wow, that's interesting.
wow.
So you're your own cameraman and everything.
Well, we have always, in the last 10 years, we have been our own camera. I have a camera, we shoot our own video. For sports guys, that's kind of good because if you're in sports, you have an eye for sports, maybe sometime a little bit better than a photographer who's not used to sports. It's very convenient to follow the ball. In football, you know what to look for. Baseball, you know where you're going and stuff. So I've been shooting for 10 years. But when you're out there now, and for instance, 3 weeks ago or maybe 2 weeks ago when they had Nurses Day at Hartford Hospital, and I'm in the middle of 100 nurses who have been treating COVID patients, you know, and I'm by myself. I have no reporter. I've got nobody watching my back, my front. It's a little, intimidating out there to do it by yourself. You don't want to be banging your equipment into people and get making them nervous. So it's challenging in that regard. And all of our photographers and news reporters feel that way. We're out there every day. We're not on the front lines treating people, but now we are talking to the people who have just been treating people. So we're the second group of people in. I don't mean to get off sports, but it's kind of
No.
because that's kind of what I'm doing right now.
Right.
I had a chance. You asked me about maybe the future of sports. By the way, I know I get long-winded, so jump in when you want to.
This is talk. It's long form talk. So
I love long answers because I do some podcasts, and there's nothing worse than somebody who gives you 2 sentences. But last week, we did how COVID is impacting Connecticut and the future of travel, the future of entertainment, the future of the economy, and the future of sports. So I was out and I interviewed, one of the things right now, Little League Baseball. They want to play. So they're trying to figure out how Little League, how American Legion. So the national people have said, we're not sponsoring, we're not sanctioning Williamsport with the Little League World Series. They're the governing body. We're not going to be participating in Little League. Now, if you want to go try to do some things yourself, you can. American Legion, we're talking thousands of high school kids who play all summer long. Right now, they're not playing. And these are kids, a lot of them lost their senior year of baseball and will never play again. So we talked about immediately trying to figure out, you don't have to have fans. Mom and dad can bring chairs and sit along the baselines. You have to do that. But now you got to take the umpire from home plate, move him behind the pitcher. Players can't be in the dugouts. You got to change the ball and wash them down after every inning. Catcher's equipment's got to be thoroughly cleaned all the time. So there are some challenges immediately getting that done. They're going to try. Some leagues are going to try it. Some are going to say it's just not worth. The experience isn't the same. So do we want 13 and 14-year-olds to go through that kind of experience? So then the next thing is high school sports. So what I've been told by the CAAC, they're not going to do anything until the kids go back to school. So say they go back to school on time, September, right? Was like the first week of September. Well, by September, all the fall sports have already started practicing. Field hockey, soccer, football, cross country. They've already started. Well, they're not even going to start practicing high school in this state until at least 2 weeks after the kids have gone to see how that goes, to see can kids be in will the health issues not be able to be solved those first 2 weeks the kids are in school. So now you're already looking at high school sports in this state will be postponed, what I'm hearing, at least 2 weeks. So now you're starting mid-September, which means you're not going to play 10 football games. You're probably going to play 7 or 6 or 8. With sports like soccer, field hockey, you can play 3 games in a week. Right. You could tighten the schedule. Football, you can't play more than 1 game a week. That's just the nature of, and then what about the physical aspects of football? Every play, you're blocking, you're tackling.
That's right. It's very physical.
It's, it's constant contact. So those are the challenges. And then we're looking down the road. Some people I've talked to said this may be the norm. You may never see a handshake after a game again, a high five with teammates, hugging after you've won a championship. Never.
Well, Joe, as a sports director, and I listen to you sometimes on Fridays when you cover high school football.
Our big shows. Yeah.
You seem extremely passionate, that
Yes.
you love what you're doing. Can you fake it now with this whole new routine that we're going to be operating under? You really don't like the way things are set up, but you still got to be unprofessional.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you block that out? Or how do you change your approach? Are you going to be interviewing people?
Well, I'm naturally positive, upbeat, energetic anyway. So we
Right.
start with that.
Okay.
I think, if anything, I got to say that the crowds do even help us as reporters get, you walk into a gym and a crowd's fired up and you're looking for the crowds. But I think it's going to be on us as reporters, and I know I won't have a problem with it. It's funny you say this. This is my 47th year in television.
Wow.
President.
I'd love to get to 50, get out, and the FBI won't be able to find me. But I need one more. So I just naturally get excited. I still like the idea of being on TV, of telling stories, of bringing information to people in a way that they may not have heard it before. So that won't change for me. If anything, it might be, it goes back to, why did Tom Brady want to leave the Patriots? I was like, and go start something new.
Right.
I get, after making a long, incredible, great, successful run, of saying, there's nothing else to do here. Let me see if I can do something like this somewhere else.
It's the next level. Yeah.
So for us, this may be a new way to have to figure out how to do things using all the tools we have. But now, how do we navigate? How will we do interviews? How will we tell these stories when there aren't fans in the building? Can we still bring that kind of excitement? I know there are going to be restrictions. It's, when you go to a game and it's, it's Windsor and it's East Catholic basketball and you're down at, at Berkeley High School, they're packed on top of one another. The media's jammed in. They got to close the doors and get people out. I mean, that's going to, I don't see how that's going to be the same until there's a vaccine and everybody says, well, we're 100% safe, whenever that is. So we're going to have to do things differently. You know what I miss the most? So I'm working from home, but I miss this.
Yeah.
Conversations, talking to people about stuff other than, thank you for being an everyday hero.
Right.
But I want to talk about sports a little bit. That's why I was so interested in just watching the golf match you referred to over the weekend. It was spectacular to watch, and I think you may see more of that if you can get microphones on people like Tiger Woods and Tom Brady when they're playing golf, and Phil Mickelson. More so than the golf, it was the banter, the instruction that they were going, stuff that you never get in a golf tournament, because first of all, as soon as your guy hits a shot, they go to the next guy hitting a shot, then the next guy hitting a shot. In this, they had time as they're going up to the hole, and then they're looking over stuff you don't get when you're watching golf, because they're immediately going to shot after shot after shot
And
after
they're
shot.
wide shots at some point. Too.
So exactly, and I really enjoyed that aspect. I think you can get more of that.
Yeah, that from all that I have gleaned and hear, I mean that could become the new standard for golf. I mean, it could change the way golf is. It was overwhelmingly received.
They still need to bring the fans in because of the charity aspect.
Yes.
Most of these, and actually the Travelers this year have received commitments from their sponsors who say, even though we know there aren't going to be fans, and the sponsors want fans there because they see their billboards, there's the signs, the presents, they're still making contributions, because don't forget, for the last 7 or 8 years, the Travelers has donated $1 million+ to the Connecticut charities.
Is that the Birdies for charities, right?
Yeah, Birdies for Babies.
Okay,
That's
yeah,
one.
Yeah.
They Hole in the Wall gang. They're a big recipient. So you're still going to have the fan presence. Social distancing fans on the golf course. I mean, if you ever watch a golf tournament, most of it you're walking around, you're sitting on hills. That's going to be a challenge. But I think you will see more of these events, assuming you can get people to do them. It's easy to get Phil and Tiger to do this today because they're not prepping for any other tournaments.
Right.
But who? And you don't want to get anybody but those guys. I'd love to see Michael Jordan in one of these things. I think that'd be spectacular. With talking about sports. I mean, the golf was the most watched golf cable event ever. So the NFL draft was the highest rated, I think, event on ESPN in years, because people are so starving for sports. The Last Dance, which was phenomenal, I'm referring to the Michael Jordan special, the 10-parter on ESPN, was phenomenal, huge ratings. And I enjoyed it so much because I worked in Chicago in 93 and 94, which, by the way, was the year that Michael said, I think I'll play baseball. So that was kind of so I got to see that firsthand because I actually covered him as a baseball player. So these kinds of things are great, but remember, there's still nothing that replaces, let's have an event and see who wins. Right. You're seeing a lot of stuff now where we're all going back. Well, this happened in 1979, so-and-so did this. But you know what's going to happen. It's fun to look at these games, but the beauty of sports still is, let's tee it up, let's get together one-on-one opposite each other, and let's see who wins. Right. And that's what people are missing right now. It's an event, sports, where you don't know who's going to win, and anything could happen. I mean, who predicted, I don't know if you saw it, that Tom Brady hit a shot in that it would backspin and roll into the cup, and he stole the show that day. This was right after Charles Barkley worked him over. So, I mean, and he responds, there's the killer instinct in a guy like that. But to watch that, and it's back to your point, I think you'll see more of it, but it's never going to replace. We missed the Masters this year. They're moving them all. The U.S. Open. I mean, when you watch 2 years ago, Tiger Woods coming back, walking up the fairway, and thousands of people cheering. You get goosebumps and tears. I mean, you can't replace that. That's what sports does. And it's not going to be like that for a while. It's just not going to be.
But I think the first indication, because actually I think it was yesterday, that the NFL actually is expected to have fans in the stadium. Now, that hasn't been confirmed. That's not really an official report. But I think that's probably going to be a big test because even though television obviously is how you can market the NFL with the television revenue stream, but I think if the NFL decides to have fans in the stadiums, don't you think other sports are going to look at that as a gauge to say if they're successful or they fail, that they can either duplicate what they're doing or do something differently?
I agree with that. But I'm not sure the NFL has carte blanche. I mean, what if, the mayor of Foxborough says we're not going to open the state, we're not going to let the stadium be open. You can't get into the place.
Okay.
I think a lot of it, the same thing. You got the metal, all these stadiums, you still got to get to them. You got to be able to have access to them. But the other thing is, the NHL, the NBA returning to work is only a month in. Their practice would start. They're not going to have a lot of time to see how it went for the NFL.
Okay.
So it's going to be a short window of success. But there's no question. I think actually people are going to see how it goes with baseball.
Baseball first.
Because that's July. But nowhere near the draw that the NFL is. And then don't forget the other big thing is college football.
That's true.
Yeah. Who's going to shut that baby down? It's one thing when you got 5,000 people at UConn. When you got 100,000 at Michigan, at LSU, I mean, who's going to tell those people they can't put their games on?
Right.
Which puts someone like UConn, who this year for the first time football is an independent. They don't have a league. So who do you think the first games will be cut if teams have to shorten their seasons? They're going to play their conferences and cut their independent games. Well, UConn right now is an independent for everybody. So they're on the verge of maybe not having as many games to play because you'd be the first ones to get kicked out of a schedule. What if you only can play 8 games in college instead of 12? Well, they're going to play their 8 conference games so they can have a conference system set up. So there are lots of questions with the fall. And baseball's the first choice, but the NFL, which has started to open some of its training facilities with social distancing guidelines, and I don't know if anybody's done that story yet on what that looks like. But as they start to open, and don't forget, July is when their training camps open. So they've got to move to, July, and then they're playing exhibition games like 3 weeks after that. And then you've got the big, first game, the first Thursday in September. So we're talking, 2.5, 3 months? What's it, June? So, you got 3 months to figure it out.
Well, Joe, the National Basketball Association was one of the few major professional sports leagues that didn't cancel its season Do you hear any insight that they're going to be returning towards the remaining portion of their season and going into the playoffs?
I think what they're trying to do is figure out what would be a fair way to have a playoffs when they can get access. You know, because they still were only basically, just went to the All-Star game and then it basically shut down right after that. So that the biggest thing I think for all of these pro leagues, we'll do it without fans. We'll put it on TV. But again, it's another sport where they're sweating, they're banging. These sports are all physical and not. So what if LeBron James says, you know what, I don't feel safe. I'm not going to play. What if 3 other guys say, you know what, I'm sorry, but I don't feel safe.
Right.
Well, Joe, do they have that right to actually not
Absolutely.
play? I mean, it wouldn't be violating their
You
contract?
Well, I think LeBron could probably take that hit.
Yeah, he can take
for 6 months.
Right.
But if that's saying, so you get a couple, that's what they talk about in baseball. What if, 10 or 15 big stars say, I don't feel safe. First of all, I don't want to be away from my families that long because there's talk that they would be sequestered in the cities that they're in for quite a while without their families. Or just, what if, and a lot of these guys can take the hit. So I'm not going to play this year. I'll forfeit my $3 million I'm not going to get this year, but I've still got $100 million I'll make the following years. LeBron's played half his season. Basketball now is his secondary or third income because he's got production companies and all those deals. So I think if some stars say, I'm not going to do it, I don't feel safe to play 18 games or something or 10 games so that we can have a finale of the season, blow it off.
I would also think that probably because this pandemic has, is here, I would even think this would probably even change the way in their contracts for future dealings. Is there going to be a pandemic clause in their contracts?
And if it's not called a pandemic, it would be something similar to that unseen catastrophe clause.
Yeah.
Like the tornadoes blow down all 15 stadiums at once. I'm going way out there, but I absolutely think that something like that is going to be in a clause. Yes.
Well, Joe, what's your biggest concern going forward in professional sports? I mean, just how you feel it's going to turn out. I mean, if the Major League Baseball season starts as the first Major League professional sports teams to start playing baseball, what do you think would be the downside, just the way things are operating now?
And that's a good question. That's the first time I've been asked this. I think the biggest risk, this is just me, you go 2-3 seasons without fans at games, you're going to lose those fans and maybe the next generation. Everybody's just going to start watching on TV. Why do I have to go?
Right.
I can root for, I'm a Giants fan, Yankees fan. I can root for those teams from home. Don't have to go, don't have to worry about it. I think the biggest fear, I'm almost in a position where I would like to see it not be successful without fans. Because if it's successful without fans, it's just like this back to work.
Right.
How many of these companies you think are want to have these big brick and mortar buildings that they got to pay rent and taxes on and electrical, and if they can have 80% of their workforce working from home, why bring them back?
That's right. Lower operating
I think
costs.
that's a big issue. And now clearly fans are such a big part of the experience, but I worry that we could lose. What if they don't play Little League Baseball for 3 years? Where are those 13, 14, and 50 years going to go? In fact, someone that I had in my story, she's a futurist, predicted that you may see more kids now playing things like tennis, badminton, ping pong, sports where you can still be athletic, but don't have the physical contact. So I worry about fans, and I worry about young people. I mean, if you tell, kids this year they can't play Pop Warner football, well, maybe they try a different sport. So I think sports for youth will change, for sure. Youth sports is going to be impacted. I mean, there's a whole bunch of 12-year-olds who thought they were going to be playing for the chance to go to the League World Series this year, who aren't going to be able to play anything, playing in their neighborhood.
Right.
So I'm worried about the success of sports without fans. Great for TV, believe me. And then who do we lose at the youth level because they're not allowed to play sports or play it in a way that it was meant to be played, and it wouldn't know. I mean, baseball's not going to be as good if if it's not baseball, if you can't sit in the dugout and ride, cheer, and then the umpire is calling balls and strikes from behind the pitcher. It's tough enough to call balls and strikes from behind home plate.
Yeah.
Now that said, on the positive note, a couple of people I've talked to said, well, maybe when we get out of this, we'll be more appreciative of just playing the games and some of the other nonsense that the technical issues that we have to do, getting rules and regulations passed, and parents and coaches and youth groups, maybe that stuff will go away because we'll just appreciate again the idea that we have sports, we can play sports, our kids can go to sports, and some of that other stuff will disappear.
Now, on a television side, you mentioned earlier during the show that the WFSB Channel 3 staff is going to start to go back into the studios.
Yes.
Is that going to happen exactly when?
So I think and now we have the state mandate, which precedes anything we could do as a corporation, but WFSB is part of a large media conglomerate, Meredith Corporation. They have like maybe 20 stations around the country. And the station protocols for our company is, I think, June 10th is the first day that people can report back into the building. So we have people at the building. Our anchors, for instance, are in studio, but you never see them on the set together. There's one on this set, one on another. We have some directors, some people, but I'd say 80% of our staff is working from home. So what they're thinking is, from the first wave, the weather people will be the first people back. You start to get into hurricane season. You start to get these violent tornado kinds of thunderstorms in our area. So they want to have the weather people back in, where we have more access to the technology that they don't have at home. So they'd be first.
Right.
I'll have to come in at some point in the next few weeks, assuming I'm going to be the host or one of the hosts of the Travelers shows, because we are going to cover the Travelers. There's the one thing that we are seeing: the sponsors need a place to go. So sponsors are going to start coming back as we do things. So we're going to have waves. I think 4 waves. First one June 10th. Then I think they're going to wait 2 weeks, see how it goes, because now in the building we have to social distance. They're starting to put up plastic, separators between the desk. Cleaning stations, we can't have guests come in. I do a podcast, but I can't do my podcast right now because we can't bring people in. And these are corporate decisions. So we listen to what the state says, but then we also have our corporate. So there'll be 4 waves. For me, if they start playing baseball, I'm sure they're going to want to have some highlights of actual stuff that's happening, because I really look forward to getting back and doing a sportscast.
What's your favorite sport? I mean, what sport do you miss the most right now in sports?
My 2 favorites are football and baseball. So I'm clearly missing, but I would miss football hugely. First of all, I love covering UConn football, whether they're winning or losing. I like the whole idea of the community spirit, the fact that we're looking at maybe the future pros. But I would certainly miss, more than college, the NFL, because I'm a diehard Giants fan. Of course, back to my days, long before you guys were thought about anything, when there was only one game on TV. There was no pregame show in the NFL. There was no postgame show. There was one game. It was on Sunday, and sometimes maybe a 4:00 game. So, and this goes back to Sunday afternoons with my father in Syracuse, New York, where we moved when I was a kid, watching the Giants on football. So I'm a diehard, long-time Giants fan. The offshoot to that is in '86, '87, I was working at Channel 2 in New York. Giants win their first Super Bowl, and I'm there covering it as like a little kid in a candy store.
Wow.
So definitely, Lawrence Taylor team, one of the great teams. That was their first Super Bowl win. Also that year, I was covering the '86 Mets, and you guys know how that story turned out if you're a Red Sox fan.
I am, unfortunately.
I was there for all those games. So I will miss football the most. But right now, and I don't spend a lot of like I'll watch every single play of a Giants game. I'll cruise into a Yankee game because don't forget, there's 6, 7 a week.
Right.
It's not like you got to see it all the time. But I do miss. I like the pregame shows. As a media guy, I like how they do things on television. There's nothing, and you know this doing this. There's nothing like live radio, live podcast, live, because you never know what's going to happen.
We know that, right, Stan?
Yeah. Exactly.
No doubt about that.
You
Yeah.
just don't know what's going to happen.
Anything can and does happen, always.
But that's the beauty of it. Then watching how people react to that, and you sit there and say, "Oh yeah, I remember when that happened to me," and so on. So I miss the live aspects of the pregame, the postgame, the interviews, the stuff on the field, and then the games itself. So baseball now, but I would definitely, and plus I'm a huge fantasy football guy. I'm in 3 leagues, so I would definitely miss that aspect of watching football.
Last week I heard that Phyllis George passed away.
Yes.
One of the first female sportscasters on CBS Sports. And how does, I think of her, I think of Jane Kennedy when they worked together on CBS Sports. How has the role of women as far as sportscasting, and I know even in sports, has changed? I can remember growing up seeing women like Althea Gibson playing golf, Billie Jean King playing, certainly the Battle of the Sexes with Bobby Riggs,
Riggs, yep.
Dating myself here.
Nope, I'm right with
I
you.
remember that. I remember that match.
For the youngins, you don't know that. Go YouTube that and you'll find that out. Google it. So what's different now than then as far as women in terms of sports and newscasting?
And you get me at that's a perfect time for me to talk about that because I was coming up as a young sportscaster starting in the early 70s. That's how far back I go. And I actually worked in LA with a woman named Jane Chastain, who was also one of the first. And there's no question in the early days, every male who watched TV would say, what do you know about sports?
What are you doing here?
What do you know about it?
Yeah.
You don't know nothing about the game. You have no business doing that. So that has changed hugely.
So the attitudes, yes.
I think it's funny that you even asked me that because I was watching golf watching the Tiger thing with my next door neighbor, and they brought in, I can't think of her name right now. She works at CBS, and they're saying, he said to me, "Why is she out there when Charles Barkley should be on the course asking the questions?" And actually, she's good. I can't think of her name right now. Okay. But the point is, what's happened is, and in our market, when I first came here, so this was 2006, we had 3 female sportscasters on the market, and that's a lot. Yeah. But now, if there's still this, you better come out of the gun knowing what you're talking about right away.
Yes.
Because if you don't, you're dead to me.
Yeah, you're dismissed.
Like I would get a chance to make a couple of mistakes as a male.
That's right.
That may have changed a little bit.
Yes.
But not a lot. But now, to me, the only thing is the locker room thing. That's why locker rooms have to still be kind of
off limits.
But yeah, there are some of the.
And there was controversy about that too. Will they let the women in the locker room? How will the guys feel about the women being in the locker room?
Well, what they had to do was they had to start making a separate area for, or everybody went, males and females, because you can't let some reporters have access and then others not. So to make it equal, you had to move them all out to separate rooms.
Yes.
But now, for sure, and if you ever want to know how smart a sportscaster is, listen to them talk for an hour on a podcast. You can find out real quick whether they know what they're talking about.
Right.
The only problem I do have is that I still think that some female reporters think that they can just show up on a sideline of a game without ever having worked in Binghamton or Elmira or Hartford. That there's kind of like a job category sideline reporter, and they just get there.
Right.
And that's not how it is. You still have to work your way up.
Got to pay your dues.
Get in there, but once you're there, and to me, it's a no-brainer. If you're smart and you ask good questions and you're entertaining,
it boils down to good reporting. Good journalistic instincts, I guess.
But it's funny you even say that because everybody says, you're a reporter, entertainer. I've always felt in sports, I'm an entertainer and then a reporter. I will always slide to the side of being more entertaining if I can do that, because, you know, the biggest challenge for sports, and this hasn't changed in 40 years, that the people who watch the newscast, I'm not talking about ESPN, 80% don't care about sports in that newscast. It's weather,
Yeah.
local news. So that's only 20% of the people who've tuned in at 6 o'clock care about sports.
Interesting.
So my job for the last 40 years has been, how do I get that 80 to watch without upsetting the 20 who really want sports?
Right.
And that's, you know, so when you I've kind of figured out how to do that. You have to be entertaining, you got to do some commentary, you got to have some quips, you got to, you know, it's not just about, as my very first news director said, for most people, highlights are just little green men running up and down the field. You know,
You got to bring it to life.
you got to
Yeah.
go beyond that. So, and that has not changed. So entertaining, I love listening to people who are smart about sports, and I always assume that when I'm listening to someone, they know at least as much as me and probably more, so that I can learn something when I'm listening to it. And if I get that feeling, I don't care who's doing it.
That's terrific.
Joe, you actually mentioned you're getting close to 50 years in the professional sports or sports industry.
Yeah.
Do you look at anybody that's been in the sports industry? I know there's been some announcers. I think I can't remember his name for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Used to be
Vin Scully.
Vin Scully. I think he did 50.
Yeah, he did play-by-play baseball.
Play-by-play.
Yep.
Do you look at people sometime and get certain inspirations, certain techniques from other sports announcers?
I did on the way up. One of my first critics was Bryant Gumbel. I worked with Bryant at K&BSC in Los Angeles. I was 25, coming out of Syracuse, no college, had no clue about life, about anything.
Right.
And Bryant takes me aside after like a week and says, "You don't know what you're doing. These stories you're doing, they're not good enough. They're never going to appear in my sportscast." So that was my first hard lesson. Because up until then, it was about that I had a good look, I had a lot of hair, I kind of knew enough about sports, but I was pretty good on TV. You know, I've always said this, and I've had 100 interns. I always tell them, we can teach you how to edit, interview, report, write, but you can't teach boom. You know, you can't teach
Right.
that thing that comes. You could make it a little better,
Right.
but you can't teach it. It's God-given. You're born with it or you're not.
Yeah.
So I always had that from the beginning. And it was weaker on the things that you learn in college and journalism school and in life. So Bryant was my first, and he's still killing it. And his HBO's Inside Sports, not Inside Sports, but sports specials on HBO are spectacular. They're still well done. So he was the first guy who really told me I don't know what the heck I'm doing. But I've always kind of forged my own way, and I've always been, I had a news director early on who said, just go with your gut. Push the line, the envelope, and see how far you can go. And if you get pulled back, you get slapped down. I've always been a person who would always rather ask forgiveness than permission. Now, in today's world,
Right.
I could never, ever come up through sports like I did, 40 years ago, with an opinion, a commentary, looking at issues in society where you can kind of take little jabs, because now you're going to blow yourself up. Because you know as well as I do, if I say that shirt's blue, somebody will say, "What are you talking about? That shirt's gray."
Yeah.
And they believe it's gray.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
And not only that, but then I'm an idiot because I think it's blue.
Yes.
In the old days, you could argue gray, blue, but now you get called a name if you don't agree with people. And
Oh,
that's
yeah, the
what has
polarization.
changed with society. So I'm the kind of person, I put up a tweet, and I look at it.
Right.
And then I ask my wife, "What do you think?"
Right.
And then I look at
She'll
it
tell
again.
you.
And then I look at it again. And I don't send them,
That's right.
because careers blow up on tweets.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, everything I send out, it gets cleared,
Yeah.
because you're ravaged if you use proper grammar, it might make your argument stronger. You know, I mean, where'd you learn how to put a period? I mean, it's just the ruthless.
Semicolon, yeah.
I miss the discussions we used to be able to have, even in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we could go in there, and now the big offense is if you disagree with somebody, you're not a team player.
Oh, yes.
Right?
We
Right?
know.
Well, I'm a team player. Let's talk. In the old days, you could say, you're an idiot, and laugh that off.
Right.
Now,
everybody gets angry.
you're up in HR.
That's
if
right.
You call somebody
You're getting
an idiot.
written up.
Joe, I believe you missed the camaraderie that you can't replace on television.
Exactly. You just, I just miss making people laugh with issues of today. I don't know how Scott Haney hasn't blown himself up because he's ad-libbing 3 hours a day,
hilarious.
right?
Yeah.
He's
Yeah,
ad-libbing 3 hours a day.
I know. He must be driving himself crazy. Can't do that. But it's better Connecticut and oh my goodness.
At least Better Connecticut is scripted, but
Yeah.
in the mornings,
Yeah, the weather.
it's wing, and he's on every 5 minutes.
Yes.
It's
Joe, it seems like your personality can't be faked. I mean, you are, like you say, upbeat, positive, enthusiastic person.
Yeah.
And you mentioned you've been involved in sports for close to 50 years.
Yep.
Does it bother you sometime, and as a professional, you really can't show it when you hear certain NFL or Major League Baseball players holding out for a 5th-year contract, $5 more million, when they have this privilege of being able to play a tremendous God's gift sports? Does that bother you, or it doesn't matter to you?
I confess that I'm a capitalist because the window is still so short for these guys.
Okay.
And I've always believed this. There are only 32 people in the whole world who can play quarterback in the NFL?
Mm-hmm.
So just like the 32 best teachers in the world and the 32 best firefighters and the 32 best doctors should all be paid at the high. Now, whatever that ceiling is, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But people who are extraordinary, I believe, should be compensated in an extraordinary way, because I don't want to get into politics here, but one of the incentives to being great and doing more things and discovering is the incentive of the reward of that, not just doing it because it makes you feel good, which is one reward.
The financial
So
piece. Yeah.
I don't have a problem with players, and the fun part is watching teams get burned, because now they got to pay a guy a 10-year contract, especially in baseball, knowing the last 4 years he's probably not going to be worth anything. But they got to pay him to get him for the first 6 years. So you see a lot of teams, mostly in baseball, give long-term contracts where they know the last 2 or 3 years they're going to get crushed, because the guy, he's either going to be retired or traded, or they're going to have to pay him money knowing he's not going to deliver. So the money thing has never. I mean, look, you look at the entertainment business, movies. You look at broadcasters. Think about this. So when I worked in New York, which is the #1 market, I did exactly the same job I'm doing here, and made 3 times as much money for doing the same thing, because it's the largest market with the most viewers, more advertising. So to me, I'm not jealous of people who. Here's my secret to success. You want to make enough money so that you think you're being fairly compensated, but not so much that you're the first guy they take out when they have to make decisions. And that's kind of been my thing. But I say, if you can get it and somebody's willing to pay it, do it.
Capitalism.
That's right.
A lot of people disagree, including many members of my family. I have 2 daughters, 120, 124. Big, not necessarily capitalist, and all of a sudden they're getting stimulus checks. Now it's,
Yeah.
Come
for the government.
I got paid and didn't have to do anything.
Right.
Joe, do you know why, the real reason why Tom Brady left the New England Patriots? I mean, I heard reasons of the contract. The Patriots were looking to move on. To the fan out there, just to the person in general, do you have any idea exactly why you think Tom Brady decided not to, sign another contract, or the Patriots didn't renew his contract? I
think he was offered a contract, whether it was the right contract. I mean, it's always easy to say, we made him an offer and he turned it down. Well, if the offer was minimal or not what somebody wanted, it makes it sound like the player was the bad guy, right?
Right.
Not the owner. We wanted him to stay. Now, under these conditions. So I still believe, not knowing anything other than what I've heard, he wanted to, he did everything there was to do in New England. With the head coach he's been tied to. They never separate them out. They always can one win without the other. I think maybe this was the time to just contracts up. I can go to a nice place to live all the time. I don't have to worry about the weather anymore in New England. I mean, you know, and I can see if I can do this again in a different scenario. I think it could be just as simple as that. I perfectly get it. If somebody said to me right now at the end, my Channel 3 contract is up, and one of the other stations said, Joe, we want you to come over and see if we can, you know, do this or that, I would at least say, oh, let's talk about it, because it's just another challenge. And I think guys who are, remember, there's only like 4 guys that you can't even put in the same class. Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, Tom Brady, I don't know who else, Muhammad Ali maybe, who are just the absolute top of their game, won all the time. You know, a lot of people have talent. A lot of people have desire. It's the rare person who's got talent and desire. And then the third, the desire to be great for a long period of time. A lot of guys are great. They have the desire to make it. They get the big contracts, the big deals. It's easy to take it easy. But Tiger, Michael, Brady, always trying to be greater no matter what they've already done. And then, don't forget, he's in a category at an age group where it's never been done, 41. To me, it could be just as simple as that, and that it was not some conspiracy that, you know, I mean, what have the Patriots done that would make you think that they've got a quarterback ready to go who would be better than Brady anyway right now? So they want to sit for a year building a guy? I think it's just that simple, that he was offered. It wasn't the greatest contract he could get, and he can now try to see if he can do something somewhere else. It could be that simple.
You still believe he has some good years left?
Absolutely. It's interesting, as we were watching the golf, I don't know if any of you saw it, talking about Phil Mickelson. There's no doubt that mentally, he still has 100% of his game. So physically, maybe he's down to 90 or 80. So that's what happens as you get older. So I still think Tom has got everything going on up here, which is huge for a quarterback. It makes up for that little 5 or 10% drop off you have if you can see the game the way he sees it. So I think he's got a good team around him. And my hope, because I hate, you know how in society now we try to tear down greatness? If you're great, you must have cheated.
Right.
Yeah.
Why? Why can't we just have some guys, some gals who are just great without having to figure out what they did wrong to be great?
I think I'm always interested in what they did to be great.
Yeah.
What's their winning formula?
Yes.
How can I get some of
You know,
that?
not that they cheated or they had the.
Right.
So I think he can still be great, and I'm hoping for him. Even during the Deflategate thing and all the I've always said, be careful when you tear down your heroes, because we ain't got many of them. You know what I mean? We don't have many of them.
And by you being here in WFSB Channel 3, you get the benefit of having the New York Giants games usually on
And the
once a
Patriots.
week, and
Yep.
the Patriots.
Yeah,
So
and we're the Patriot station, which I love, because if I can't have my team on, I've got, you know, they're on Fox, which
Right.
is but the point is, as good as the Patriots go, is good for our television stations. Good for me as a sports guy. Patriots fans want to see Patriots and highlights. 2 years ago, we went to the Super Bowl when they went. I mean, there's a lot of advantages to the, you know, when the UConn women go to the Final Four. I've been there for every one of them. So there's a lot of, so I have my own teams, but I always root for the local team, because what's good for the local team is good for my television station, and it's also good for me.
Right.
Any questions,
No,
Stan?
this was
This
like
was,
a sports
Did
management.
we kill it? How did we do on
Yeah,
time?
I mean,
Great.
we're doing great
How do we
on
do
time.
on-
We're about ready
We
to
did
wrap
an
it up.
hour?
We did an hour. That's
Yeah.
fun.
It goes
Where
by.
did
I
it
told
go?
you I'm long-winded.
It goes by real
It
quick.
does. It is.
Yeah, but
the
that
subject was good, you know.
sports is such a fascinating thing, because it's such a part of the America,
Yes, it is.
you know, way of life, and you know, it's sports is big worldwide. But with it being with the absence of sports and the
Even on a local level, you notice. I mean,
it's-
we don't even have the yard goats. We don't have
Yeah.
the soccer.
Right.
And I mean, you've got these two beautiful stadiums that are sitting there empty.
Have you seen the new Dillon Stadium? How beautiful that looks refurbished. It's
Oh,
fantastic.
it is.
It's beautiful,
It is.
absolutely beautiful.
And it's empty right
Yeah.
now.
A lot of kids though are dynamic, dramatically impacted.
Yes.
And for a lot of younger people, the scholarships that are involved.
Right.
It's gonna be
The
devastating.
camaraderie, yeah, that whole thing.
But we will move forward. It's going to be interesting to see where all of this shakes out.
Mm-hmm.
We'll know soon enough. What will the new normal for sports be as we go forward? But
Yes, my last thought on this as you're talking about
press.
that. Remember I told you this, the second guessers, no matter what's being done, somebody's gonna say, why did you do that? How come you didn't do it this way? So everything that's gonna come back will be second guessed up the yin yang, believe me. They're everybody will have it should have been done this way.
yeah,
Why didn't you do it that way?
Yeah.
It was too slow, it was too fast, too many, too few.
That's
You're gonna get that. That's my
your
last
That's
bench.
your prediction, okay.
Yeah.
all right. Well, we will take a short break, and then we'll be back to close up the program. And stick and stay. Don't go anywhere. It's Morning Talk. We'll be right back.
Hi, my name is Eddie Brown, Program Director at Hartford Communities That Care. I've been in the field of youth development and mentoring for the past 5 years, serving children, youth, young adults, and families. It has been an amazing experience since I have been on board with HCTC to help make a difference in the lives of our youth. Throughout my experiences, I've learned the importance of a good mentor, which is simply being the adult that has time for a child, who cares about that child, and who believes in that child. Here's a few points. Allowing the youth to understand their full potential, respects cultural differences, providing the prolonged relationship which helps the youth as they go through life, listens well, is stable, is a positive role model, nurtures a positive relationship that respects the mentee, reinforces mentee's success, shares decision making with mentee, and last but not least, passion, wanting to make a difference. Practicing and applying these skills have been very vital in all the work I do to help assist and coordinate in the programs and services we offer at HCTC. I thank you for your time, and for all the mentors and role models out there, let's continue to be the change.
I can't.
Love yours.
You can always come to Spectrum to have a hug, to have a space to be free to who you are, to make choices, most freely and always.
No such thing. No such thing as a life that's better than yours. No such thing as a life that's better than yours. Love yours. No such thing as a life that's better than yours. No such thing, no such thing.
You're always welcome at Spectrum. We hear you, we feel you, we are you. This is our community, and this is our promise.
My name is Latoya Thompson, and what I got from the HPU program is that I have a voice, and I can go to my kids' school, and I can work with the teachers, the principals, and everybody that's there and that's willing to be on the team. And I definitely encourage parents to go out there, join the HPU, and so they can know that they have a voice just as well. And it's other things just as well that HPU brings to the table. Not just only to know that you have a voice, it's other things that you can do. So my experience that I've been working with HPU for years, and it's nice to see that it's more parents involved. And now that parents that come into Burr School, they want to be involved. So that's a good thing. That's a good feeling to know that you can teach other parents about the program. So I take that, and if anything, I would do it all over again because I love what I do.
There we go. Now that's bumper music. That's some good bumper music. It's the morning show. Well, actually, that's not true. It's morning talk. Welcome back. I'm your host, Jason. Join me, of course, as we close out. We've got Vicky.
Yeah, great show today.
Jonathan Smith.
Yeah, I had a good time this morning with these two guests, David Walker, former U.S. Comptroller General, and then WFSB Sports Director Joe Zone. So it was an interesting show.
Different.
Fun,
Different, yeah. Different but good.
I think guest brings a little, I like guests because I, did shows in the past.
Jonathan likes talking to the guests.
That's my drive there.
Right,
but it was.
I like listening. And talking.
And talking. You like both.
I like both, yeah. I always feel like I learned something from every guest that we've had so far. Yeah.
Well, guests are always. I like guests too, because guests always bring something. They add to the program their wisdom and their knowledge. And
absolutely.
So, our mission here is to share as much wisdom and knowledge with you listeners out there as we possibly can. And, of course, we also want to give you all opportunities to call in. We got a new super graphic. My wife hates it. She hates it because she doesn't. Where's my call graphic? There it is.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's okay.
Because she doesn't like the QR code. Nobody uses those.
Yes, they are. They are using them.
Yeah. So if what
Fox
happens
61 the other night has their.
If you point your computer.
Oh, what about your phone?
Well, I don't mean your computer. Pick up your desktop.
Okay.
No. If you use your phone and you scan the code,
okay,
it'll give you access to the Zoom room.
Ah, okay. Very good.
Mm-hmm. It'll put you into the Zoom room. Once we start doing the Zoom room.
Okay. So right now, if we tried to do this is not set up for that right now.
It'll set up.
Okay.
I mean, if you did it right now and I turned the Zoom room on, I'd
Okay.
see you. I'd see you come in to the Zoom. You have Zoom on your phone?
Yes, I do.
Do you have a QR code reader?
I don't know. I don't think I do. I probably have to download that one.
All right. So if you have a QR code reader, then you would
see.
just.
I don't know what I have on here. It's a new phone, so it's full of surprises.
You do that, and then the way we're going to take calls,
right,
is we'll put people on through Zoom. That way we know who you are. We know you can't just call in and be a prankster on Zoom because we know where you are. So for people who really want to participate in the program, we're going to give you opportunity to participate. You'll be able to join us, almost like a guest would. And so we have established the Zoom Room. At least that's what we're going to try and do. See
So
if we
there's
can.
quite a few different ones here. Is it a QR code reader that's free, or is it a
QR code reader?
Yeah, I mean, when you go into the app store, there's a lot. So what's the best one for that?
I have Norton.
Okay, Norton.
I use Norton because I use Norton, for my virus control stuff, my online app, and so I have my QR reader, and you point it at that thing, and boom, it puts you right in.
Okay.
It puts you right in. You don't have to click on any links or anything. Just boom, and there you go. Now, of course, you could always click on the link, because if you go to the Facebook or YouTube, if you scroll down, you'll see the link to the Zoom Room. You click on the link, and that'll put you in as well. So when we open the Zoom Room, that's how it'll be.
Interesting.
Well,
technology and television.
Exactly.
Technology and television. And it's just a matter of how you make it work.
That's it.
Well, again, I appreciate you putting everything together this morning, Stan, with the technical aspect and hosting the show. And, we have some big things being planned in the future with this network. Might be a few changes here and there, but when everything comes to be, people will definitely know exactly. This is, like you say, the soft launch.
This is the soft launch. This is what we call the development stage. Development stage of the production.
Right.
And so, like a pilot. The pilot comes out, but this is the way we do development.
Yeah.
Free speech television. You give you opportunity to get out there and do it. That's the way I've done it for 37 years. You just throw people out there and let them get along. However, at some point it has to become rock solid.
Rock solid, right.
So our target date for Rock Solid is June 1st. So we've spent the last couple of weeks. This is week 2. It seems like it's been a long time.
Sure does.
This is week 2. But as we wrap it up, that's just about it for today. I want to thank our special guests. I want to, of course, thank Vicki Fennell for joining us. It's good to have you back.
I never felt like I left.
Yeah.
Well, it's only been like 3 days.
I know. It felt like it's longer.
And of course, Jonathan.
Yep, just that long weekend that we had. I mean, we would have been here yesterday if it wasn't a major holiday.
Yeah. Jonathan said, well, if you want to do a special, we can do a show.
We can do a show.
But Vicky's not coming in.
Right. So
okay, all right.
Yeah.
Let's have to back
Sorry, party pooper.
That's okay. All right, well, it's time for us to head on out of here. My friends, be blessed. Have a great day. We'll see you here tomorrow when we do it all
for joining us.
once again.
Okay.
Ciao.
Ciao.